Chapter 2739 2739 Requesting Leave. Chapter 2739 2739 Requesting Leave. 2739 Requesting Leave. Wally pondered for a moment before saying, "However, after considering the fact that you've already interacted with void particle energy, due to the repulsion of this void particle energy, the chance of success will further decrease by fourfold." Ling Han rolled his eyes in an exaggerated manner. Did this not imply a chance of less than 1 in 100 trillion? This was infinitesimally close to zero. Was this a completely impossible task? Ling Han fell deep in thought. His future was indeed bright, and as long as he progressed normally, he would eventually become the most powerful first-tier Heavenly Venerate. Only after advancing to the second tier would his advantage disappear. For people to become a Heavenly Venerate, which of them wasn't a supreme prodigy? Thus, if one attempted to defeat such a foe, that would be an extremely difficult task. Now, Ling Han possessed 3 Heavenly Venerate techniques, and he had more so been tempered by void particle energy. Thus, his battle prowess was enough to crush all Pseudo-Heavenly Venerates. In fact, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage even against first-tier Heavenly Venerates. However, such an advantage would only exist while he remained at the first tier. After advancing to the second tier, he would become just like everyone else. He would have to take things one step at a time. Can I master 6 different fundamental powers of the Genesis world first? And only master the unique power of the dimension after that? Ling Han asked Wally. If this were possible, he could extend his advantage all the way until he became a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate. After advancing to the 7th tier, how many more opponents would he have? This number could definitely be counted on one hand, or perhaps 2 hands. Thus, what would it matter if their battle prowess became the same? Wally shook his head, and replied, "After becoming a Heavenly Venerate, it's very difficult to turn back around to comprehend the fundamental power of the world. Even if you comprehend only one more, it will still render it impossible for you to comprehend the unique and fundamental power of this dimension. The 6th tier will be your limit. Then that's meaningless. To be invincible before the 7th tier, yet be unable to reach the 7th tier forever? Won't I be screwed? If it were someone else, would the lure of reaching the 6th tier not be enticing and freakish enough? However, Ling Han's goal had always been the 7th tier. He wanted to become the strongest. In other words, if I want to become invincible, my only choice is to gamble with that 1 in 100 trillion chance? Ling Han said with a frown. It's a chance smaller than 1 in 100 trillion. Wally corrected. Ling Han looked Wally in the eyes. Could he not be so pedantic at such a moment? All right. Ling Han suddenly discovered a burst of confidence. Even though his chances were microscopic, he would still give it a shot. Before this, possessing the unique power of a dimension was always a weakness. After all, just how powerful were he, Wu Haoyang, Lin Yolian, and Xian Qihu? They could easily crush other Pseudo-Heavenly Venerates with a wave of their hands. This was for no other reason than having experienced tempering from void particles or other fundamental powers of Genesis worlds. After advancing to the 1st tier, they could still maintain, or even extend this advantage. However, what if one could possess the power of 2 dimensions? Or even 3? Or 10? Or 100? At that time, would one still lose to those who had been tempered by void particle energy? If the quality was inferior, one could make up for it with quantity. In some sense, this would be akin to advancing to the 8th tier, 9th tier, or 10th tier. After discussing some finer details with Wally, Ling Han left the Martial Academy. He had initially wanted to deal with some old animosities and drag out the Imperial Void Celestial King and his son to give them a healthy beating. However, he couldn't find the 2 of them, and it appeared as if they had gone to the realm battlefield. However, Ling Han didn't recall seeing them in the first level. Perhaps the Imperial Void Celestial King had already become a Heavenly Venerate? This wasn't impossible. After all, the Imperial Void Celestial King was no less talented than the Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable. All he lacked was some rare opportunities, and it was because of this that he had been unable to take that vital step. Even while in the celestial realm, he had already been very close to advancing to the Heavenly Venerable tier. After arriving in this transcendent dimension, it would be extremely normal for him to advance in leaps and bounds. So be it if he advanced. In Ling Han's eyes, first-tier Heavenly Venerates were only SOSO. He could easily rival them. Meanwhile, if he also became a first-tier Heavenly Venerate, his advantage provided by the void particle energy would allow him to crush other first-tier Heavenly Venerates as if they were his playthings. After several more decades spent on travel, Ling Han finally returned to the realm battlefield. Ling Han discussed his plans with the Empress. After all, no one had ever succeeded on this path before. In fact, this was a path with no destination. Thus, he needed to discuss it with his wife. Bewitching Maiden Ro and the others also joined this discussion, and the women all had their own opinions. Some were of the opinion that Ling Han didn't need to push himself so hard. Even if he slowed down and took things one step at a time, he would still eventually become the strongest Heavenly Veneration of the strongest. However, if he truly chose this path, he would very likely waste countless years of time. Meanwhile, the Empress resolutely supported Ling Han. In fact, she desired to accompany him and also take this path to become the most powerful first-tier Heavenly Venerate. After giving this some more thought, Ling Han ultimately decided to follow his heart. Otherwise, he would definitely have regrets. He would be left to ponder just how powerful he could have become if he had insisted on following this path. After making a decision, Ling Han could no longer be swayed. He went to the Celestial Administration to request leave. Generally speaking, everyone who became a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate would have to come here and volunteer their strength to resist hysteria. This wasn't the responsibility of so-and-so, but rather the responsibility of everyone. Thus, Ling Han's request for indefinite leave should have been impossible to approve. However, because his contributions were far too dazzling, had already charged into the general leaderboard, with his contributions being hundreds or even thousands of times greater than those of others. What harm would it do to grant him some leave? Thus, the two Heavenly Venerates responsible for this area passed on Ling Han's request for leave to the higher-ups. The reply was swift: request denied. This rejection was given by a higher-up in the 4th level. Apparently, this was a person with the surname He. His words were as follows: "If one can enjoy special treatment in this place, then perhaps a person with great contributions can even flee in the face of battle?" After hearing these words, Ling Han immediately guessed the identity of this person. This person was definitely He Yufeng's father. Fuck! How incredibly petty! Ling Han silently clenched his fists. However, without obtaining permission, he naturally couldn't leave the realm battlefield for extended periods of time. After all, if everyone became so relaxed and uncaring, how could they still resist hysteria? Thus, in the realm battlefield, discipline reigned above all else. Everyone had to obey orders. If Ling Han disregarded this rejection and chose to leave anyway, he would never need to return to this place. If he dared to return, he would definitely be captured and perhaps even executed on the spot. He would be regarded as a deserter. What should I do? Just as Ling Han was anxiously pondering over this, another order quickly arrived. This was an order from another higher-up, and the person who came to deliver it was Lin Piaoxue. Whose order was this? Lin Luo's, a 7th-tier Heavenly Venerate. His opinion was that Ling Han was a peerless prodigy who could potentially advance to the 7th tier in the future, which would allow him to change the tides of battle. Such a person should therefore be given more freedom, and not be weighed down by rigid rules and regulations. Just like that, the two Heavenly Venerates in the Celestial Administration quickly approved Ling Han's request for indefinite leave. Just like Wu Jihong's words had reduced Wu Haoyang's breaking of the rules to nothing more than causing a ruckus, Lin Luo's words also possessed such power. 7th-tier Heavenly Venerates were the most powerful in this world. "Thank you, Miss Lin," Ling Han said to Lin Piaoxue as he clasped his hands. She had helped him immensely. Lin Piaoxue smiled faintly and said, "You're the second person to cause my grandfather to speak and bend the rules." Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, "Who was the first?" My auntie, Lin Piaoxue replied casually. Lin Yulian, the princess of the Lin clan. She was the most prodigious member of their clan, and she enjoyed an equal standing with Xian Chihu. She was regarded as someone who had the greatest chance to reach the 7th tier. Ling Han nodded, saying, I definitely won't disappoint Lord Lin. Chapter 2740 Experiencing the Power of a Dimension. Chapter 2740 Experiencing the Power of a Dimension. 2740 Experiencing the Power of a Dimension. Ling Han set off, accompanied by the Empress and the others. He planned to invite the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, the large black dog, and the Rain Emperor as well. If they managed to succeed, they would become the most powerful, whether that was in the 1st tier, the 6th tier, or the 7th tier. It was anyone's guess whether they would succeed or not, but it was at least worth a try. However, it was a shame that only the Empress' request for leave was approved. She was his wife, so she could enjoy such a benefit. However, this was not the case for the others. The rules couldn't be bent again and again. After all, Ling Han wasn't a 7th tier Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han sighed with emotion. Where had Hun Yo gone? How nice it would have been to go together. No. She's most likely on the 5th level, the Empress said. Ling Han nodded in agreement. Hun Yo had been led away by a 4th tier Heavenly Venerate, so it was very likely that she was cultivating in the battlefield of the 5th level. She was definitely cultivating, as sending her into battle against Hysteria's army in that level would be no different than sending her to her death. We'll look for her when we return. The two of them held hands as they left. Meanwhile, the others all remained in the celestial guest residence due to the limitations of their cultivation level. They strolled casually, and it was as if they were a divine couple. If Hysteria didn't exist, how nice would it be for us to find a quiet place to settle? The Empress suddenly said with emotion. She had battled against Hysteria's army for many years, witnessing her fair share of blood and death. At this moment, she couldn't help but make such a remark. After we defeat Hysteria, we'll look for a quiet place to settle and have a bunch of children together, Ling Han said with a smile. There was a glimmer in the Empress' beautiful eyes as she lightly bit her bottom lip. She was indescribably beautiful. Ling Han was instantly seduced by her, and he immediately pulled her into the celestial guest residence. In any case, they had heaps of time to spare, so it wouldn't hurt to make some love. After journeying for more than 300 years, Ling Han and the Empress finally arrived at the border between the Flaming Frost realm and another dimension. This was the Profound Negative realm, a high-level dimension. There was no more battle here. However, different dimensions would repel each other, so even though there was no danger from other people here, there would definitely be dangers posed by nature. Bursts of chaotic air currents hammered down, flaunting the regulation transcending might of heaven and earth. Back when the celestial realm had collided with the foreign realm, a small world had been created. When this small world was eventually obliterated, the energy shock waves that it unleashed caused even Heavenly Venerate Wula to suffer wounds when he traversed through it. This was a clear sign of heaven and earth's might. Why don't you enter the celestial guest residence as well? I'll take us through this area, Ling Han said. The Empress nodded and entered the celestial guest residence. She didn't act stubbornly. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, causing golden symbols to instantly pulsate all over his body, forming a golden bell around him. He then strode forward, charging headfirst into the currents of chaos. Boom! A devastating power surged over, causing the golden bell around Ling Han to shudder violently. It was as if the golden bell were about to shatter at any moment. He hurriedly hastened his steps as visible fractures appeared on the surface of the golden bell. After just a few minutes, these fractures had already become cracks that allowed wisps of chaotic energy to barge inside. Ling Han hurriedly channeled the indestructible heaven scroll with his full strength, repairing these cracks with great difficulty. This was utterly terrifying. While channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, his defense could rival that of a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. He gritted his teeth as he continued to endure the barrage of attacks. However, the further he ventured into this area, the more devastating the burst of chaotic air currents became. The symbols on the golden bell continued to dim, while Ling Han continued to forcefully inject his power to repair the bell, allowing the symbols to light up again. This was truly far too difficult. Ling Han's stamina was vast, yet he couldn't help but pant from time to time by now. He felt the urge to lie down and sleep for several years. One had to realize that he hadn't felt so exhausted even after battling against Wu Haoyang for tens of thousands of years. He spat blood, and veins bulged all over his body. However, he still continued to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll no matter the cost. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a simple matter of him facing perilous danger. The celestial guest residence would be immediately crushed, bringing death to the women inside. For the sake of his lovers, Ling Han mustered an indomitable fighting spirit. It was a bitter battle, yet he continued to withstand and push forward, with his steps becoming quicker and quicker. After an entire day, Ling Han finally made his way out of the danger zone. Pun! He instantly collapsed to the ground. He felt as if his bones were all crushed, and it was as if his body had been drained of all energy. Only after lying down for 10 years did Ling Han finally pick himself back up. He felt like he had recovered 10% of his energy. He started to extract void particle energy. After another 3 years, he finally recovered 80% of his energy. He didn't sit around any longer, choosing to set off instead. The Empress also came back out, and the two of them started to investigate this heaven and earth. The spiritual chi in this dimension was weaker than that of the flaming frost realm, though it was still extremely rich and abundant. After all, this was a high-level dimension that was still countless times more powerful than the celestial realm. The two of them set off to look for a giant volcano. They desired to comprehend the unique power of this world, so the closer to the core of the world they were, the easier this would be. However, journeying to the core of the world was no easy task. According to Wally, they could reach the core of the world after finding a giant volcano and entering via its crater. After several months, the two of them found a giant volcano, which they immediately entered. Funnily, they came across a group of adventurers on their way, and these people actively warned them about the grave dangers of this area, most likely because of the Empress' beauty. When they saw Ling Han and the Empress directly leap into the crater of the volcano, their eyes almost bulged out of their heads. After looking around for a while, Ling Han and the Empress shook their heads. The magma in this area was extremely high in temperature, yet it would still struggle to melt divine metal. Such a task would take it countless years. Moreover, it was very shallow in depth, and it wasn't long before they reached the bottom. It was naturally impossible to reach the core of the world here. Ling Han and the Empress exited the volcano and continued their search. Of course, they didn't forget to cultivate while embarking on this expedition. Finally, after 700 years, they found a supervolcano. According to the legends of the profound negative realm, this was a definite forbidden land. Even celestial kings would be forced to stop in their tracks. However, Ling Han was fearless. After many years of recultivation, the Empress had also largely mastered the regulations of this realm. She could once again wield a battle prowess at the 9th heaven. They entered the volcano, and were immediately greeted by high temperatures. The Empress immediately let out an astonished yelp. The temperature here was far too high. Ling Han drew her into the celestial guest residence, and continued to venture on alone. This volcano was surprisingly deep, and Ling Han still had yet to reach the bottom after descending for 10 days. At this moment, the magma around him had already become a dull red. Its destructive power was immense, and Ling Han had no option but to channel the indestructible Heaven's Scroll to resist its power. After descending for 3 years, Ling Han finally reached the bottom. There was no more magma here. Instead, he was surrounded by chunks of strange stone. Before him was an expansive void, in the center of which hovered an 18-colored orb that radiated with an indescribable might. This was something that couldn't be approached and couldn't be touched. It was the core of the dimension. In fact, the might of heaven and earth was profound. However, limited by the regulations, only a small portion of this might could be unleashed. If anyone dared to touch the core of the dimension, however, they would suffer the full wrath of heaven and earth. That would be incredibly dangerous. 7th tier Heavenly Venerates had the right to touch the cores of dimensions. In fact, they could even destroy these cores of dimensions. However, Ling Han certainly couldn't achieve this. He didn't dare to approach the core of the dimension at all, keeping his distance. If he walked any closer, he would be shattered into smithereens by the overwhelming power that the core possessed. Meanwhile, the Empress had also exited the celestial guest residence, and was sitting even further away from the core. The two of them started to comprehend the power of the dimension, grasping the unique power of the profound negative realm. If a 9th heaven celestial king wanted to advance to the Pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier, the first step would be to comprehend the unique power of the dimension. However, how many people could succeed? This was far, far too difficult. Thus, even with the Empress and Ling Han's prodigious talent, they were still unable to make any progress in the short term. Chapter 2741 2741 Fusing Power Cores. Chapter 2741 2741 Fusing Power Cores. 2741 Fusing Power Cores. The Empress still had yet to reach the peak stage of the 9th heaven, so it was extremely difficult for her to comprehend the power of the dimension. Meanwhile, because Ling Han had already been tempered by void particle energy, this formed an obstruction that caused his progress to be insanely slow. According to Wally's theory, it wouldn't be difficult for him to comprehend the unique power of the first dimension. This was because doing so was a necessary step. However, if he wanted to comprehend the power of a second or third dimension, the difficulty would grow in an exponential manner. Before long, his chance of succeeding would become infinitesimally close to zero. The two of them sat silently, with time quickly flying by. After 10 million years, the Empress finally reached the peak stage of the 9th heaven. After her celestial seed underwent 9 transformations, her ability to comprehend the fundamental power of the dimension grew significantly. After 20 million years, the Empress was finally able to interact with the unique power of the profound negative realm, extracting it to temper her body. This signified her transcendence above the celestial king tier and advance to the Pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier. The Empress faced heavenly tribulation, and this was naturally nothing to worry about. It was essentially no different from a 9th heaven heavenly tribulation. After another 10 million years, Ling Han was finally able to detect the unique power of the dimension as well, extracting it to form a core in his dantian. What he wanted to achieve was a pioneering accomplishment, something that no one else had ever achieved before. During his more than 100,000 years of analysis and calculations, Wally had calculated far more than just Ling Han's chances of success. He had also deducted potential avenues to reach such a goal. Otherwise, his calculations and predictions would have lacked a solid basis. With Wally's suggestion as a base, Ling Han further added some of his own understandings. He then started to experiment with his hypotheses. What was the use of extracting the power of a dimension? Inspired by the phenomenon of dimensions engulfing other dimensions, Ling Han treated himself as a core that could not only house all powers, but could also allow these powers to circulate and persist. In this way, he would no longer face the dilemma of his powers being rendered useless after he left the corresponding dimensions, and was thus unable to extract the corresponding powers. In his dantian, the wisps of power condensed into a core. This would become the source of his power. However, while extracting the unique power of the dimension might be easy, forming a self-sustaining supply of such power would be no easy task. The first step was always the most difficult. Ling Han didn't hurry, and his successive failures only worked to nurture his patience. Shortly afterward, the Empress also joined him in his investigations. Both of them were geniuses. Even though the Empress was slightly inferior, an extra mind was still definitely helpful to the cause. They continued to channel their greatest eternity everlasting physiques, accelerating the flow of time. However, the higher one's cultivation, the more difficult it would be to accelerate or decelerate the flow of time for oneself. Because of this, even though they had both already reached the Pseudo-Heavenly Venerable tier, they were still only able to accelerate the flow of time 1,000-fold. This was already a good result. After all, if a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate entered time cultivation chambers, nothing at all would happen. The flow of time wouldn't even double. They experienced failure after failure, reaching a point where even the Empress started to feel frustrated and irritated. Fortunately, Ling Han was there to calm her down, allowing her to regain composure and continue working toward their goal. During the fifth cycle of 100 million years, Ling Han finally achieved success. He managed to form a core inside his body, one that looked just like the core of the dimension before him. This core endlessly provided him with power that was unique to this dimension. Boom! Power surged, yet it was unable to leave his body. It could only temper his physique. This was because he was still a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. This was the result that Ling Han was looking for. Right now, he had no desire to advance to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Under Ling Han's patient teaching, the Empress also managed to form a core. This was a comparatively simple task. However, the task of extracting the power of numerous dimensions, fusing it into the core, and then having the core provide all the different unique powers of the dimensions was a far more challenging task. The more powers they fused, the more difficult this would become. Counting briefly, the two of them had already experienced 500 billion years. This was an astounding length of time. They left the profound negative realm, and set off for the next realm. Just like before, they spent numerous years searching for a way to approach the core of the dimension. Afterward, they sat beside the core, and attempted to interact with the power that it possessed. This was an insanely difficult task. Regardless of whether it was the fundamental power of the Genesis world or the unique powers of these dimensions, they would all innately repel one another. Fortunately, this was only a difficulty and not an impossibility. After all, they only possessed a small number of unique powers. After 20 million years, they both managed to detect the unique power. It was at this moment that the true problem revealed itself. They needed to fuse this power into their core as well, making it become a source for future power. They didn't want to treat this power as a disposable matter, something that would become useless after a single use. They made several attempts and experienced several failures. Only after another 10 million years did they finally succeed. Two different powers. Ling Han sensed the two powers, and found that they were still far from being able to rival void particle energy. This still wasn't enough. It was far from being enough. The two of them set off again, arriving at the third dimension. They repeated the same process again. This time, it took them 50 million years to finally succeed. They then set off for the fourth dimension, spending more than 70 million years there. Only then did they head toward the fifth dimension. The time they spent in each dimension became longer and longer, and this was because their progress was becoming slower and slower. When they arrived at the 10th dimension, they failed to make any progress even after 100 million years. Ling Han silently made some comparisons in his mind. The unique powers inside his body could almost rival the void particle energy already. In other words, if he returned to the Flaming Frost realm at this moment, he would definitely be the strongest in his cultivation level regardless of which tier Heavenly Venerate he became. However, this was far too simple. Ling Han was sure that he wasn't the only one to come up with this idea. After all, which of Lin Luo, Zhou Heng, and the others wasn't a prodigy among prodigies? Would they not have attempted this? Perhaps many elites had attempted this before. It was just that they had experienced mixed results. Perhaps some had fused together the power of 10 dimensions, while others had fused together the power of 20. Perhaps some had even fused together the power of 30 or 50. I have to become the strongest. Ling Han made up his mind. Only 100 million years had passed, so how could he give up so easily? Another 100 million years passed, and Ling Han was finally able to detect the power of this dimension. He then spent 30 million years fusing this power into his core. The difficulty of fusing each subsequent power would rise exponentially, so there would eventually come a stage where Ling Han would be unable to succeed even if his lifespan were limitless. The Empress was much slower, and it was clear that her talent was ultimately inferior to Ling Han's. You can head off to the next dimension first. I'll look for you after I finish here, the Empress said. Ling Han thought for a moment before replying. All right. He set off for the next dimension, leaving marks that only the Empress would understand along the way. With his current Heavenly Venerable tier power, he could ensure that these marks would remain for all eternity. Time whizzed by like an arrow. 100 million years, 10 billion years, 100 billion years, 1 trillion years. Ling Han continued to travel through dimensions, almost forgetting the concept of time. He only knew that inside the celestial guest residence, bewitching Maiden Row had already reached the peak stage of the 9th heaven. As for the other women, their talent was limited, so being forcefully raised to the celestial king tier where they could enjoy an indestructible body was already their absolute limit. 2 billion years, 5 billion years, 10 billion years, and then one epoch. Ling Han was already unable to keep track of how many dimensions he had traveled to. He only knew that the core inside his body had already grown to a gigantic size. He was about to reach his limit. If he failed to control this core, he would inevitably face self-destruction. Ling Han decided to return after extracting the power of this dimension. He still needed to leave some space for the Flaming Frost Realm, the only transcendent dimension in the Genesis world. He naturally wouldn't abandon such a power. He calmly strolled around, exuding a sense of boundless loneliness. Taking into account the acceleration of time, he had already cultivated for a whopping 1,000 epochs. In fact, this had already exceeded the lifespan of most dimensions. He had already traveled to all high-level dimensions and even medium-level dimensions. Right now, he was in a low-level dimension. The spiritual chi here was observably scarcer. Just like before, he started to search for a path toward the core of the dimension. At this moment, however, he suddenly felt a strong sense of apprehension. Chapter 2742 Ling Feifan. Chapter 2742 Ling Feifan. 2742 Ling Feifan. Danger? This was Ling Han's first reaction. With his cultivation, if he entered someplace dangerous, his divine sense would immediately react and give him a warning. However, he immediately shook his head. This place was peaceful and tranquil, and it didn't seem like a dangerous place no matter how he looked at it. Moreover, his divine sense wouldn't miss any detail, so he was certain that no elite had approached him. Perhaps someone dear to him had come across trouble? This was also impossible. Such a feeling would only occur if both parties were in the same dimension. However, his lovers were all inside the celestial guest residence, and the Empress was definitely still in another dimension. Thus, how could he experience such a feeling? He brushed it off as a mistaken sensation. He had been cultivating in earnest for far too long, so perhaps his brain was a bit muddled? He decided to ignore it. However, after a short while, this feeling of apprehension became increasingly strong, so much so that he was unable to ignore it any longer. What's going on? Ling Han decided to put aside the task of searching for the core of the dimension first. He needed to deal with this sensation, or else he would be unable to cultivate properly. This was the martial crystalline realm, a low-level dimension. The most powerful elites in this realm were 7 second-tier Heavenly Venerates. Because this dimension was located much too far away, they had failed to receive the command of the Flaming Frost Realm. Thus, they remained as the rulers and overlords of this dimension. Of course, second-tier Heavenly Venerates were indeed very powerful as well. In any case, this was also the limit of what this low-level dimension could hold. Otherwise, if they were more powerful and didn't leave, it would be this dimension that crumbled and vanished. In fact, it wasn't that the Flaming Frost Realm couldn't extend its influence to this dimension. Rather, it was that all dimensions starting from the martial crystalline realm were low-level dimensions. They possessed far too few elites, so the elites from the Flaming Frost Realm chose not to waste their time visiting these dimensions. The cultivators here were extremely committed to the realm wars, and this was because the medium-level dimension above them hadn't launched an invasion against them. As such, they could unleash their full power at the low-level dimension beneath them. Right now, they were on the cusp of victory. Once their dimension advanced, the upper limit of their cultivation level would also be increased. The second-tier Heavenly Venerates all eagerly anticipated the arrival of such a day. The Yin clan. That unfilial girl still hasn't changed her mind yet? And Taiyan asked, his face filled with rage and his might overwhelming. This was only natural. He was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, so just a glare from him could kill a celestial king at the peak stage of the 9th heaven. Father, she's your daughter. Don't you understand her temper? A young man beside him said with a bitter smile. There were 9 ribbons of iridescent light around him, signifying his status as a 9th heaven celestial king. This was a low-level dimension, so a second-tier Heavenly Venerate and a 9th heaven celestial king were a formidable force that could crush the world. And Taiyan raised his hand, wanting to slam it down on the armrest of his chair. However, after holding his hand in the air for a while, he ultimately decided against slamming it down. Instead, he heaved a long sigh, saying, I pampered that girl far too much, never interfering in her matters. Now what? She's actually discussing marriage with those dogs from the Promised City realm. Where does that leave me? The Promised City realm was the dimension that the martial crystalline realm was attempting to destroy and engulf. That little bastard! He actually dared to seduce my daughter. If I capture him, I'll definitely hack him into 1,000 pieces. And Taiyan said with a humph. Father! Right at this moment, a young man ran inside, saying, I've just received this report. Our army achieved an overwhelming victory, and we captured a large number of enemy cultivators. The brat Ling Feifan is also among them. Ha ha! After faltering for a brief moment, and Taiyan immediately roared with laughter. Bring him over. I've already sent someone over to grab him. The young man replied. He was also a 9th heaven celestial king, and he was Taiyan's second son and Ping Hai. The other 9th heaven celestial king hesitated for a bit before saying, Father, are you truly going to kill him? Little sister doesn't seem like she's playing around this time. What if she becomes too heartbroken? He was Taiyan's eldest son and Ping Tian. And Taiyan glared at him, saying, He's a dog bastard from the Promised City realm. If I wed my precious daughter to him, wouldn't I essentially be colluding with the enemy? Humph. I'm definitely going to smack that brat to death. Only after a month was Ling Feifan finally brought to the Yin clan. After all, none of them were Heavenly Venerates, so their speed naturally wasn't impressive. And Taiyan personally walked out of the Yin clan residence. He wanted to see for himself just how extraordinary this Ling Feifan was, one that he could actually capture the heart of his dear daughter. A youth sat on the ground, with no shackles on his body. However, his cultivation had already been sealed. Even if no one guarded him, he would still be unable to run very far in a day. A mountain river tier cultivator would be able to catch up to him in a single stride. Thus, this young man was sitting on the ground all alone, an indifferent smile on his face. If one looked closely, one would find that his appearance shared a 30% similarity with Ling Han's. Not only was his appearance similar, but even his disposition was similar. And Taiyan humphed, saying, You still dare to remain seated after seeing me? Ling Feifan picked himself up and clasped his hands, bowing in respect. And Taiyan felt even more displeased. How had this coward captured his daughter's heart? My respects to father-in-law, Ling Feifan said. And Taiyan's jaw instantly dropped, speechless. Fuck! This was no coward at all. This was a fearless hooligan. Pooh! And Ping Hai couldn't help but splutter with laughter. Pa! And Taiyan instantly smacked him across the head. This brat actually dared to laugh at his father? Had he grown tired of living? And Ping Hai bared his teeth. His father was seething with anger, so that smack had truly been painful. You only just advanced to the Celestial King tier, so what makes you think you deserve to become my son-in-law? And Taiyan asked. Even though he detested this brat who had seduced his daughter, he had to admit that he was fairly brave. It was also because of this that he was willing to continue this conversation. Ling Feifan wore an apologetic expression as he replied. In fact, there's nothing special about me. It's just that I'm a bit handsome, am an honest person, and also have huge potential that could see me become a Heavenly Venerate in the future. The corners of Taiyan's mouth twitched upon hearing this. Are you sure you're being apologetic? Are you not just praising yourself? He detested this kind of careless and superficially clever person. Kill him, he said with a wave of his hand. Father! Father! A woman cried from inside the residence. A beautiful girl with delicate features then ran over, with Pingtian trailing behind her. She grabbed Tian's elbow and said, Father, you can't kill him. This woman was Tian's only daughter and youngest child, and sure. She was only a few million years old, and she enjoyed much doting from Tian. Tian couldn't help but shoot a glare at his eldest son. He had told him to keep an eye on her and stop her from coming out, yet he had treated his words as nothing but just that, words. Otherwise, with his strength as a ninth heaven celestial king, how could he possibly fail to catch up to his younger sister, someone who had only just become a celestial king? He twirled his beard and asked, Why can't I kill him? And Xior gritted her teeth and said, Because I'm already pregnant with his child. Ha! Ling Feifan's jaw instantly dropped to the ground. I've only touched your hand, he thought to himself. You can even get pregnant from that? She's truly giving it her all to save me. Meanwhile, Tian became wild with rage, his hair billowing even though there was no wind. He glared at Ling Feifan with a wicked expression, saying, Very well, brat. How very impudent of you. You even dared to lay hands on my daughter. Right now, he simply wanted to kill this brat. He reached over to grab Ling Feifan. Father, if you dare to touch him, I'll commit suicide. And Xior hurriedly shouted, her voice firm and resolute. Chapter 2743 Grandson. Chapter 2743, 2743 Grandson. 2743 Grandson. Tian forcefully retracted his hand. However, with a single thought, Xior instantly collapsed to the ground. He was far too powerful, so there was absolutely no need for him to get physical to deal with a measly first heaven celestial king. Pingtian, take your sister back inside, he commanded. Father! And Pingtian stepped forward, wanting to persuade his father. And Tian shot a glare at him. And Pingtian instantly fell silent, not daring to say another word. In the clan, only his younger sister wasn't afraid of their father. He and his 6 brothers all respected and feared him. And Tian turned his gaze back to Ling Feifan. This brat had to die. Ling Feifan sighed, saying, By the looks of it, I'm going to die here today. Father-in-law, aren't you going to give it some more consideration? A son-in-law as outstanding as me is truly very difficult to find. You're already staring death in the face, yet you still insist on speaking with such a glib tongue? And Tian was even more displeased. He was fonder of modest and earnest children such as the 3rd son of the Yang clan. He had only cultivated for 3 billion years, yet he had already become a 9th heaven celestial king. In the future, he had the ability to become a Heavenly Venerate. Only such kind of person was worthy of his daughter. Ha! He suddenly faltered, looking up at the sky. Whoosh! A figure descended, his hair disheveled and covering his appearance. His clothes were also in tatters, and it was as if he were a beggar. This was naturally Ling Han. He had followed the source of his apprehension, and that had brought him all the way here. The captured young man was the source of his apprehension. Who was this? Why did he cause his heart to waver? Ling Han had been cultivating in earnest for the past epoch, so he hadn't paid any attention to his appearance. Even though his clothes were all treasures, the harsh environments that he traveled through caused them to gradually experience decay. And Pihai immediately stepped forward and asked, Friend, who are you? Ling Han didn't reply, instead staring at Ling Feifan. Why did this person cause his heart to waver? It was very clear that this person was in a perilous situation, facing the risk of death at any moment. However, what did this have to do with him? Huh! Why is this person's appearance so similar to mine? What's your name? Ling Han asked. When he spoke the first word, there was struggle in his voice. Indeed, this was his first time speaking in almost an entire epoch. However, When he reached the last word, he had already largely recovered, with his voice exuding a sense of indescribable might. "This junior is Ling Feifan." "My respects to senior," Ling Feifan hurriedly replied. This person was his potential savior, so he naturally had to latch on with both hands. "Ling Feifan?" Ling Han murmured. This person's surname was actually Ling as well? Perhaps this was his descendant. However, Ling Jianxue was his only son, so perhaps this was his grandson? Or great-grandson? "You too!" and Ping Hai said in rage. He was a ninth heaven celestial king, after all, so were his words really so useless? Moreover, there was still a second-tier Heavenly Venerate before them. Was it truly okay for them to ignore him? "What's your relationship with Ling Jianxue?" Ling Han asked. Ling Feifan was truly astonished upon hearing this. He had only planned to randomly grab onto any potential savior, yet this person truly had a deep relationship with the Ling clan? He faltered for a moment before replying. "He's my father." He then asked, "Senior, you are?" "He's my grandson." Ling Han was astonished. The brat Ling Jianxue had already given him a grandson? However, upon further thought, an entire epoch had already passed, so to say nothing of a grandson, he should have already had great-great-great-great-grandchildren. "You too!" and Ping Hai shouted through gritted teeth. They were taking things much too far. "Ping Hai!" and Tian said in a solemn voice. Even though the man before them was disheveled and in tattered clothing, and even though he didn't exude a single wisp of energy, he still gave him a feeling of extreme danger. Where had this elite come from? However, and Ping Hai didn't possess the good judgment of his father. In his eyes he had already seen all of the heavenly venerates of this realm, and Ling Han wasn't among the ranks of the ninth heaven celestial kings. Thus, what did he need to be afraid of? "I'll capture him," he said as he reached over, grabbing at Ling Han. A murderous glint flashed across Ling Han's eyes. In the past, hundreds of thousands of pseudo-heavenly venerates had died at his hands, yet a measly ninth heaven celestial king dared to attack him? However, he immediately remembered that this wasn't the realm battlefield. This person wasn't a mortal enemy. Thud, thud, thud. After seeing Ling Han's glare, and Ping Hai involuntarily stumbled back. It was as if a legendary beast had locked its eyes on him, causing him to perspire in terror. And Tian had no time to console his son. He stared at Ling Han and said in a solemn voice, "Friend, you're an elite from which place?" The words of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate were naturally different. Wind and clouds suddenly swirled, with even heaven and earth starting to wail. Only at this moment did Ling Han turn his gaze to Tian. He nodded and replied, "My name is Ling Han." "Pooh!" Ling Feifan coughed and spluttered upon hearing this. This person was actually his grandfather? Fuck! How could there be such a coincidence? Hadn't his grandfather gone to the transcendent dimension? Why had he suddenly appeared here? "Grandpa!" he instinctively called. "Ling Han?" and Tian murmured. He had never heard this name before. However, since Ling Feifan was referring to him as Grandpa, this person was most likely an elite from the Promised City realm. In other words, he was an enemy. Ling Han turned to Ling Feifan and asked, "What's going on?" Even though Ling Feifan couldn't confirm Ling Han's identity, his relationship with Jianxue was no big secret. Thus, he explained the situation to Ling Han. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then turned to Tian and said, "Since the love between them is mutual, why stand in their way?" "Rubbish! Of course you're happy. After all, the one being tricked away isn't your daughter." And Tian muttered in his mind. Upon further thought, he realized that if the two youths truly tied the knot, wouldn't he become Ling Han's junior? Fuck! How could he allow that? He was the ruler of this dimension. At most, the others could only enjoy a status equal to his. How could they enjoy a status above him? "Is he worthy?" and Tian asked as he pointed at Ling Feifan. Ling Han smiled, replying, "He's my grandson, so of course he's worthy." Even though his voice was calm, it was filled with a sense of dominance. Even Tian faltered upon hearing this. However, he immediately bared his teeth. Sure enough, these two shared a bloodline. The grandson was glib of tongue, and his grandfather was also confident for apparently no reason. The promised city realm was already on the verge of destruction, yet Ling Han was still filled with such confidence. Then I must ask for a lesson to see just how capable you are, Tian said in a baleful voice. Ling Han was slightly hesitant as he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. If he had spent all of his time on increasing his cultivation level, he would have at least reached the 3rd tier or 4th tier. At that time, he could easily kill a 2nd tier Heavenly Venerate with a single smack. In reality, however, he had spent all of his time and effort on fusing and condensing his core. Thus, even though his cultivation level hadn't increased, his battle prowess had definitely soared to great heights. As for how high, even Ling Han didn't know. It had already been a very long time since his last battle. What if his strike was too powerful, and he accidentally smacked Tian to death? You're afraid? Tian asked. He had truly been enraged by the grandfather and grandson duo of the Ling clan. It was because of this that he uttered such a taunt. Ling Han replied honestly. I'm considering how much power I should use. Otherwise, it won't be good if I accidentally smack you dead. Fuck. Ling Feifan immediately nodded in his mind. This was definitely his grandfather. They were definitely related by blood. His manner of speaking was exactly the same as his. As for whether Ling Han was truly capable, hopefully, his words weren't empty threats. Chapter 2744 Dare to Battle? Chapter 2744 Dare to Battle? 2744 Dare to Battle? An alliance agreed upon verbally was naturally unreliable, so having the two clans tied together through marriage was naturally far more secure. One was the most outstanding son of the Yang clan, and one was the young princess of the Yin clan. Such a marriage would naturally solidify their alliance, making it turn into an indestructible one. And Tian was instantly enticed by this offer. He had already been satisfied with Yang Xianlong to begin with, so adding to that an alliance, he felt an urge to accept this offer with no further thought. Ling Feifan was extremely anxious, and he hurriedly turned to Ling Han, shouting, Grandpa! If his grandfather didn't say anything, his granddaughter-in-law would disappear just like that. Ling Han sighed upon hearing this. Why was he forced into a fight just to get a granddaughter-in-law? Was he truly a magnet for trouble? Nephew, he said. Pooh! Ling Feifan felt a strong urge to vomit blood. Meanwhile, Yang Xianlong and Yang Jihe both glanced over with confused expressions. Who was this disheveled beggar? He was actually referring to Tian as nephew? How did he dare? That was a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate. Tian's expression was dark, and it was as if flames were about to burst from his eyes. He could barely contain his murderous urge. Ling Han waved his hands with a smile, saying, All right, let's not talk about this first. Ahem, I've also brought my grandson here today to make an offer of marriage. I hope the Yin clan can agree to this proposal. All right, Tian said coldly. Yang Xuanlong's expression instantly changed upon hearing this. However, Yang Jihe wasn't worried at all. He understood Tian very well. Sure enough, Tian continued, Which maidservant have you set your eyes on? She's all yours. Ling Han had continued to refer to him as nephew, time and time again just then, so now it was his turn to return the favor. Ling Han faltered for a moment before roaring with laughter and saying, Who would have thought? You're also a fairly humorous person, huh? I'm especially eager to meet my granddaughter-in-law now. She's likely also a very interesting person. See, what's so bad about my grandson? Even though his cultivation is slightly weaker, defeating that small fry at the same cultivation will be as easy as a wave of his hands. Ling Han said as he wrapped an arm around Ling Feifan's shoulder. He then pointed his finger at Yang Xianlong. Yang Xianlong was infuriated. So be it if he wanted to praise his own grandson. But was it really necessary to use him as a stepping stone? He humphed and said, I can suppress such trash with a simple turn of my palm. Ling Feifan naturally wouldn't back down. He pointed at Yang Xianlong and said, "If we battle at the same cultivation level, you're nothing but an insect. I can crush you to death with a single stomp." Ling Han was all smiles upon hearing this. Ling Jianxue was far too modest and calm, and that made him no fun at all. He was nowhere near as interesting as this grandson. "Do you dare to battle?" Ling Han asked, further fanning the flames. Chapter 2745 Special Training. Chapter 2745 Special Training. 2745 Special Training. New to march forward. This time, I'll leave a wisp of power in your body. If your opponent unleashes a Heavenly Venerate technique, activate this power and use it to rival him. Otherwise, battle with your own strength. Okay, Ling Feifan said with a nod. After traveling for one epoch, Ling Han had traversed through heaven knew how many dimensions. Even if he weren't specifically looking for them, he still managed to obtain many celestial medicines and divine metals. However, trying to rapidly raise Ling Feifan's strength would still be an impossible task. Thus, he planned to activate the power of his core to leave a wisp of power in Ling Feifan's body. That way, he could use it to deal with his opponent's Heavenly Venerate technique. If it were any other person, even if it were the Empress, Lu Yutong, or one of the other women, Ling Han would be unable to do this. However, Ling Feifan shared his blood, and he was an extension of his life. Thus, this possibility could be achieved. Ling Han carefully activated his core. If it reached a critical stage of circulation, even Ling Han would be ruthlessly blown apart. A single sliver at a time, Ling Han carefully manipulated this power. This power couldn't exit his body, yet thanks to their blood relation, wisps of power could still flow into Ling Feifan and temper his body. Ling Han was astonished by how smoothly things went. He had initially thought that he could only leave a wisp of this power in Ling Feifan's body. Unexpectedly, however, he could even use it to temper his body. Ling Feifan had only just advanced to the Celestial King tier, so if he tempered his grandson's body for close to 10 years, the results would most likely be astonishing. However, Ling Feifan screamed in agony. He had never practiced body arts before, so his physique wasn't especially powerful. With this power wantonly coursing through his body, he naturally couldn't help but scream. His skin started to crack, with blood spraying into the air. He appeared as miserable as could be. However, Ling Han acted as if he couldn't see this. If Ling Feifan failed to endure even this, then there would be no need for him to screw over the young girl from the Yin clan. He would be better off training for another few 100 million years. With the acceleration of time, it wasn't long before 9 years flowed by. Ling Han finally retracted his hands. Meanwhile, Ling Feifan scrambled up and fled as quickly as he could. It was as if Ling Han were a terrifying beast. He swore that he would never do this again. "Test your strength," Ling Han said. Ling Feifan swung his arm before involuntarily exclaiming, "The speed of my fist has increased several hundredfold." This was simply unfathomable. Just based on this fact alone, his strength could already increase several dozen-fold, or even several hundred-fold. Chapter 2746 Might Unleashed. Chapter 2746 Might Unleashed. 2746 Might Unleashed. Ling Feifan was astonished as he looked at Ling Han. Was this Ling Han's ability? This was far too incredible. In just 3 days, even though he felt like several years had passed, his strength had undergone a complete transformation. This was absolutely godly. "Stinky brat, hurry up and give yourself a clean. It's time to fight for your wife," Ling Han said as he kicked his grandson in the rear. Ling Feifan came to his senses, and immediately scampered off. After a while, Ling Han and Ling Feifan left the celestial guest residence and headed back to the Yin clan. It had to be said that the Yin clan was an extremely capable clan. In less than 3 days they had already finished the reconstruction of the Yin clan, which exuded the domineering aura of a Heavenly Venerable clan. In fact, weaker-willed people wouldn't even be able to approach the Yin clan. Instead, they would go weak in the knees. Ling Han appeared as calm as could be as he walked with his hands clasped behind his back. Meanwhile, Ling Feifan obediently followed after him. "How are your parents?" Ling Han asked. "They're as lovey-dovey as could be. It's as if they're joined together at the hip, and they're never apart from each other no matter what they do," Ling Feifan replied as he fiddled around with a great sword in his hand. This was a celestial tool that Ling Han had only just forged for him. With Ling Han's current ability, forging a divine metal billet into a finished weapon was naturally as simple as a single thought. "They're traveling and sightseeing all the time, and they even traveled through numerous dimensions. Right now, they're helping the Promised City realm resist invasion. Thanks to them, I was forced to become a soldier as well. In the end, I was taken prisoner," Ling Feifan said through sighs. Ling Han was surprised upon hearing this. Able to travel through dimensions? Had Ling Jianxue already become a Heavenly Venerate? "What cultivation is your father at?" Ling Han asked. "Ninth Heaven Celestial King." Ling Han was even more surprised. As a Ninth Heaven Celestial King, he could already travel through the dimensions? Did he truly possess such strength? "Father was extremely fortunate, and he obtained an extremely mysterious pearl. As long as he activates it, he can conceal his presence such that even Heavenly Venerates can't discover him," Ling Feifan explained. Only at this moment did Ling Han understand. Otherwise, he refused to believe that a Ninth Heaven Celestial King could truly travel through dimensions. In any case, traveling through the myriad worlds might allow Ling Jianxue to discover rare opportunities that could potentially help him become a Heavenly Venerate. This was Ling Jianxue's cultivation method. As they chatted, they eventually arrived before the gates of the Yin clan. There was already a person waiting for them, and upon seeing their arrival, they immediately bowed and said, "Our respects to Lord." This greeting was aimed at Ling Han, yet Ling Feifan proudly nodded in response as if the greeting were aimed at him. This almost angered the person to death was a Third Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han raised a hand and said, "Lead the way." The Third Heaven Celestial King didn't dare to defy Ling Han, so he obediently led the way. A short while later, the three of them arrived at the guest hall, wherein Taiyan and Yang Jihe were sitting in the master seat and guest seat, respectively. Meanwhile, Ensure and Yang Xianlong were standing behind them. Ensure's eyes instantly lit up when she saw Ling Feifan. Yang Xianlong saw this, and he involuntarily clenched his fists, swearing in his mind that he would definitely find an opportunity to kill Ling Feifan in a while. Yang Xianlong had only met Ensure a few times before, so it couldn't be said that he liked her. However, for the sake of his father's grand plan, it was vital that he married Ensure. In any case, he wasn't against this, as Ensure was genuinely a noble woman who was extremely delicate and beautiful. She was completely worthy of him. Thus, he didn't oppose this marriage. However, she had yet to be married, yet she was already making eyes at another man. How could he accept this? How could he not develop killing intent? Wasn't the greatest hate of a man being cucked by someone else? "Begin the battle," Taiyan said with a wave of his hand. A small tower appeared in midair, measuring 9 levels in height. It was golden in color and exuding an aura of chaos as if it belonged to the primal beginning of heaven and earth. This was a Heavenly Venerate tool. This was a battle between two celestial kings, so it was naturally better for them to do battle inside there. Otherwise, the newly reconstructed Yin clan might be obliterated again. The two youths leaped toward the tower. Ensure couldn't help but say, "Be careful, Feifan. Rest assured, I can take on 10 of this trash by myself," Ling Feifan said with a wave of his hand. He appeared as casual as could be. Yang Xianlong was almost angered to death, with his killing intent becoming even more intense. He stepped into the treasure tower, deciding that he would definitely kill Ling Feifan. Even Taiyan and Yang Jihe wore displeased expressions, with Taiyan saying, "Sure, ladies need to be more reserved and modest." As for Yang Jihe, he humped to express his displeasure. Meanwhile, Ling Han laughed heartily, saying, "Young lady, come here, come here." Ensure already knew his identity, so she immediately walked over, curtsying slightly and saying, "My respects to Grandpa." Ling Han retrieved a spatial god tool, holding it over and saying, "Here, a greeting gift, take it." "Thank you, Grandpa," Ensure said obediently. However, upon observing it with her divine sense, she couldn't help but gasp. There were countless high-level celestial medicines inside this spatial god tool, and there were even several pieces of divine metal. Their value was immense. This greeting gift was absolutely exquisite. Meanwhile, inside the Heavenly Venerate tool, the battle between Ling Feifan and Yang Xianlong had also begun. Inside this space, everything was subject to Ention's whims. Thus, he commanded the Heavenly Venerate tool to suppress Yang Xuanlong's cultivation to the first heaven. Even so, Yang Xianlong definitely still possessed a huge advantage. Firstly, his cultivation was at the peak stage of the first heaven. Secondly, he was more familiar with the regulations, so he was naturally able to channel them with more nuance and skill. However, Ling Feifan's response astonished him greatly. This was because Ling Feifan didn't attempt to draw on the regulations or whatnot. Instead, he immediately charged over to pummel the opponent. This was far too classless. Was such close-quarters combat any different from a scuffle between hooligans? Was his opponent really a celestial king? However, he immediately discovered that Ling Feifan's punches were astonishingly powerful, with his chest throbbing with each punch that he withstood. He felt terrible, and he truly wanted to cough blood. Moreover, not only were Ling Feifan's punches powerful, but they were also quick. It wasn't long before he couldn't keep up. He had initially been filled with confidence. After all, what did it matter even if his opponent were genuinely freakish? He could still unleash his Heavenly Venerate techniques. This was something that Ling Feifan definitely couldn't block. Now, however, what opportunity did he have to unleash the Heavenly Venerate technique? Pun pun pun! Ling Feifan's fists rained down with fury, giving Yang Xianlong no opportunity to unleash his trump card. "Incapable scum, you actually dared to lay eyes on my wife?" Ling Feifan spat with extreme disdain as he continued to pummel his opponent. Yang Xianlong was completely unable to reply. All he could do was defend with all his might. However, he was bound to make a mistake. One could fail in their attacks 100 times or 10,000 times with no consequence at all. However, defending was different, and as long as a single mistake was committed, the consequences would be catastrophic. Under Ling Feifan's relentless attacks, Yang Xianlong was eventually struck by a fist, which caused his bones to immediately snap. He groaned in pain. At the same time, he retreated in a hurry. If they continued to battle head-on, he would definitely be defeated. After creating enough distance, he started preparing his trump card. "Ling Feifan, it all ends now!" he roared as he raised his hands to the sky, flickers of white flames dancing across his palms. They were radiant daylight flames, capable of annihilating all matter. However, Ling Feifan couldn't help but feel slightly disappointed. He had initially thought that his furious attacks would strip Yang Xianlong of the opportunity to launch his trump card. However, prodigies were prodigies, after all, and Yang Xianlong was ultimately able to break free from his attacks. He shook his hands, feeling intense pain in his bones. Indeed, his body art had been rapidly elevated in just a few days, meaning that he didn't possess a physique powerful enough to match it. Thus, the relentless attacks just then had placed a huge burden on his body. "Stop dreaming. Your only fate is to be pummeled into paste," Ling Feifan said with a laugh. Chapter 2747 You're a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2747 You're a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. 2747 You're a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. In the outside world, Antian and Yang Jihe were both astounded. Ling Feifan was actually this powerful? Using body arts to suppress one's opponent is the battle technique of Heavenly Venerates. Don't tell me that this brat has already interacted with the unique power of heaven and earth, and used it to temper his body? The two Heavenly Venerates exchanged a confused look. A first heaven celestial king being able to interact with the unique power of the realm? This was simply unfathomable, regardless of how prodigious one was. However, apart from this, was there any other explanation? and Taiyan couldn't help but waver. Yang Xianlong only possessed the ability to potentially become a Heavenly Venerate, yet if Ling Feifan had truly interacted with the unique power of heaven and earth, he was destined to eventually become a Heavenly Venerate. In fact, he didn't really care which dimension Ling Feifan was from. After all, a mighty Heavenly Venerate naturally possessed an equally broad mind. What he cared about more were potential and natural disposition. Even Ensure was surprised. In the eyes of a girl in love, their lover would naturally be all-capable. However, she was also a celestial king, and she was more so the daughter of a Heavenly Venerate. Thus, her observation skills were naturally extraordinary. In the past, Ling Feifan definitely hadn't been so powerful. What's going on? Meanwhile, Ling Han was slightly unsatisfied. In fact, Ling Feifan's abilities included far more than just this. However, his physique was inferior, so it prevented him from unleashing any more power. Otherwise, his own body would collapse first. How should I teach the indestructible Heaven Scroll to my grandson? Ling Han mulled over this problem. He could borrow the Black Tower, and use it to forcefully teach his grandson, just like how he had learned it. Otherwise, he could modify the indestructible Heaven's Scroll and structure it like the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. That way, it could be learned one scroll at a time before ultimately being combined together. However, borrowing the Black Tower at this moment would be impossible. Thus, Ling Han felt like the latter option was the more reliable one. He immediately started to ponder this problem, thinking about how he could deconstruct the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Meanwhile, inside the Heavenly Venerate tool, Yang Xianlong started to launch his counterattack. He charged at Ling Feifan, unleashing the radiant flames from his palm as he did so, with the flames transforming into 2 white snakes that lunged at Ling Feifan. Ling Feifan roared with laughter, unafraid as he faced this attack head-on. "You're seeking death," Yang Xianlong said in his mind. After channeling this Heavenly Venerate technique, his battle prowess could rival that of Third Heaven Celestial Kings. This certainly wasn't something that newbie Celestial Kings could rival. Die! Hurry up and die! 1. When the flaming white snakes crashed into Ling Feifan, a golden bell immediately materialized around him, with numerous golden symbols pulsating on its surface. The golden bell successfully stopped the white snakes in their tracks, preventing them from advancing another inch. Yan Xuanlong's jaw involuntarily fell to the ground. How was this possible? He had never believed that Ling Feifan could also possess a Heavenly Venerate technique, and the reason for this was simple. It would be useless even if Ling Feifan had the aid of a Heavenly Venerate, as the bare minimum requirement for channeling a Heavenly Venerate technique was reaching the 9th heaven. For example, even he could only channel a Heavenly Venerate technique for 15 minutes at most. Even so, he would still end up wounded and completely exhausted. Now, however, Ling Feifan had actually blocked his Heavenly Venerate technique? There was only one explanation: he had also mastered a Heavenly Venerate technique. How was this possible? His eyes bulged in disbelief. He had initially thought that he could crush his opponent with ease, yet it seemed like he was the one who was about to be slain in the end. Ha! Little Loach, what else do you have to say? Ling Feifan chuckled as he hurriedly seized this opportunity to attack. This defensive ability didn't belong to him, so he had no way of retracting it after it had been activated. Moreover, it would only last for 15 minutes. If Yang Xianlong avoided him now, and unleashed his vicious Heavenly Venerate technique after waiting for his extreme defensive ability to vanish, he would definitely be screwed. Thus, he had to dispose of his opponent as quickly as possible. Pun! 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 He unleashed his fists of fury, relentless and overwhelming as he attempted to submit his opponent. Yang Xianlong was shocked time and time again, and his morale had already fallen into a ditch. Thus, what more power and confidence did he have to defend? After blocking a few strikes, his face was quickly pummeled black and blue. Fortunately, Ling Feifan didn't attempt to unleash any fatal strikes. He simply rendered Yang Xianlong severely wounded and unable to battle. And Taiyan shook them out in a timely manner and said, "Enough, we'll end it here." Feifan! And Xior called as she ran over, delight and joy on her face. She hadn't imagined that the issue would be resolved so smoothly. Hey, I already told you, didn't I? I'll shatter all obstacles and make you my wife, Ling Feifan said, starting to blow his own trumpet again. Humph. You people are cheating, Yang Jihe said coldly. The golden bell was still pulsating around Ling Feifan, making it as clear as could be. He resolutely lashed out, grabbing at Ling Feifan and announcing, "Cheaters deserve death." He was going to kill Ling Feifan. That way, his son wouldn't have any other opponent. "Brother Yang, please show some mercy," Taiyuan said, hurriedly stepping forward to obstruct him. He had also noticed that Ling Feifan's defensive ability was abnormal, with the golden bell capable of being summoned but not unsummoned. Rather than one's own ability, this appeared more like the ability of some treasure. However, he didn't mind this, as Ling Feifan had already displayed his freakish abilities. As a first heaven celestial king, his body had already been tempered by the unique power of the dimension. In other words, he was destined to become a Heavenly Venerate in the future. If he passed on such a son-in-law, where would he find another one? Thus, he decided to protect Ling Feifan. Pun! The two Heavenly Venerate exchanged a blow, unleashing a shock wave that instantly reduced the clan residence to ruins. "Brethren, I didn't do that on purpose," Yang Jihe said upon seeing this, hurriedly retracting his hand. Destroying someone else's residence could be regarded as a small matter or big matter, depending on the owner. And Taiyuan's expression was extremely dark. His clan residence had been destroyed 2 times in 3 days. Just who in the world had he offended? Ling Han stepped forward and said, "You want to kill my grandson? To cheat in a fair battle, and to harbor such impure intentions, what does it matter even if I do kill him?" Yang Jihe replied proudly. He naturally didn't need to show Ling Han any respect. After all, Ling Han was an opponent, and he more so didn't think that Ling Han was very powerful. "No one can touch my family. Since you want to kill my grandson, I'll send you on your way first." Ling Han replied coldly, a baleful look in his eyes. "A battle in the sky," Yang Jihe said. With a single stride, he directly flew into the sky. He didn't dare to battle on the ground. Otherwise, if he turned the surroundings into a vast sea, and Taiyuan would very likely truly become wild with rage. Ling Han naturally wasn't afraid of him. With a slight bend of his knees followed by an explosive release, he also shot into the sky, his speed even exceeding Yang Jihe's. Thus, he caught up to Yang Jihe before the former could even reach the desired height. Boom! He immediately unleashed a furious punch. Yang Jihe was both enraged and astonished. This person didn't respect any fucking customs. Was he truly so giddy to attack? However, Ling Han's strike was both quick and vicious, so he had no option but to respond. Pun! He exchanged a blow with Ling Han, the deafening explosions of their clash causing the space around them to shatter into pieces. At the same time, they were both sent flying back. Boom! Heaven and earth responded, with arcs of lightning striking down at Yang Jihe. However, they completely ignored Ling Han. Yang Jihe didn't understand this. His opponent had clearly wielded the power of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, so why wasn't he being targeted by heaven and earth? Of course, this was even though these strikes were inconsequential to Heavenly Venerates. He carefully mulled over this, and his expression quickly transformed into one of deep shock. You didn't unleash Heavenly Venerable tier power! What powers were Heavenly Venerates most renowned for? This was naturally the 6 fundamental powers of the Genesis world or the unique power of the dimensions. However, he hadn't detected any of these powers in Ling Han's punch just then. You're a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate! He exclaimed again. However, his frown grew even deeper. Chapter 2748 Battling a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2748 Battling a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. 2748 Battling a Second-Tier Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han was a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. This explained why he hadn't been targeted by heaven and earth. Moreover, Pseudo-Heavenly Venerates naturally couldn't wield the 7 most powerful powers. The problem was, however, that this Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate could rival second-tier Heavenly Venerates? Had the world been turned upside down? And Taiyan was also stunned. How is this possible? Thinking carefully about his previous exchange with Ling Han, however, he realized that he had been enraged, and thus had failed to make any observations. Mulling over it now, sure enough, he discovered that Ling Han hadn't used any fundamental power of heaven and earth. This person was powerful in his own right, so much so that he could even rival second-tier Heavenly Venerates. It can't be, right? Ling Feifan also murmured. Fuck. His grandpa was far too powerful, no? A Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate being able to battle against a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? This was a never-before-seen accomplishment. A mere Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate dares to challenge me? Yang Jiha bellowed in rage after coming to his senses. Just like the other cultivation tiers, there were also huge gulfs between each minor level and the Heavenly Venerable tier. Pseudo-Heavenly Venerates were nothing more than just that. They were far weaker than second-tier Heavenly Venerates. So what if you're a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? See how I pummel you? Ling Han said coldly. Today, he would slay a second-tier Heavenly Venerate for fun. Die! Yang Jihe roared as he launched a powerful attack. He directly unleashed a Heavenly Venerate technique, with two balls of white flames appearing in his hands. With a single sweeping motion, he thrust them toward Ling Han. Yang Xianlong had also unleashed the same technique before, but the two balls of flames had only transformed into snakes. Now, however, it was completely different, with the two balls of flames transforming into heaven-scorching flames that spread through the sky. Ling Han humphed as he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, causing a golden bell to materialize around him, symbols flashing on its surface. He then charged at Yang Jihe, swinging his fists with fury and ferocity. Pun! 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 Yang Jihe naturally wouldn't back down, choosing to face Ling Han head-on. Heavenly Venerates all tempered their bodies with the 7 fundamental powers. The higher their cultivation, the more of these powers they would be able to draw on. First-tier Heavenly Venerates could only draw on a single power, while second-tier Heavenly Venerates could draw on 2. This was as clear as could be. Heavenly Venerates naturally all possessed powerful body arts, yet because the regulations were capped at the 9th heaven, such abilities could only be used as supportive ones. Yang Jihe's body art was no weaker than that of Ling Han. After all, he was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate who had already tempered his body with one of the 6 fundamental powers. Moreover, he had been at this cultivation level for heaven knew how many epochs. The two of them exchanged blows, with each collision causing the space around them to shatter. Countless celestial bodies fell, affecting the entire martial crystalline dimension. Thus, only a few days passed before several other Heavenly Venerates hurried over. This was an intense battle between Heavenly Venerates, so how could they dismiss it? There were second-tier Heavenly Venerates, first-tier Heavenly Venerates, and also Pseudo-Heavenly Venerates. Even though this was a low-level dimension, it was already infinitesimally close to being a medium-level dimension. Thus, there was a respectable number of Heavenly Venerates. When they discovered that Yang Jihe's opponent was only a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, they couldn't help but gawk in surprise, speechless with shock. How could such a ferocious Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate exist in the world? Brother, and do you know of this person's background? A second-tier Heavenly Venerate asked in Taiyan. The grandfather of my daughter's future husband? And Taiyan naturally wouldn't say this, so he could only shake his head in reply. I'm not sure either. This was indeed the truth. Apart from Ling Han's name, he didn't know anything else about him. The elites were all extremely curious. At the same time, they also remained slightly on guard. This was because this Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate certainly wasn't from their realm. In case he was from the Promised City realm, would he perhaps bring change to the already foregone conclusion? Annihilating the Promised City realm and raising the level of our dimension, thereby allowing us to comprehend the fundamental power of the Genesis world, is an opportunity of a lifetime. We can't let anyone ruin our plans, the elites said. Once Yang Jihe was defeated, they would immediately charge forward to attack. They wouldn't give Ling Han the opportunity to leave alive. Of course, only the second-tier and first-tier Heavenly Venerates would have the right to attack. Even so, the first-tier Heavenly Venerates would still have to team up first lest they wanted to be obliterated in a flash. And Taion pondered for a moment before saying, "Perhaps this person has come from a higher-level dimension." The elites exchanged glances with each other. Even though the neighboring medium-level dimension hadn't invaded them, they had still set up a comprehensive defensive line at the two-realm passageway. Elites constantly guarded this area. Indeed, they should already burn incense to the gods to thank the fact that this higher-level dimension hadn't invaded them. Would they dare to take initiative to launch an attack? Thus, they knew nothing about the neighboring medium-level dimension. Moreover, no one from that dimension had ever traveled over, either, with absolutely no communication between the two dimensions. They coexisted in a peaceful manner, with either side offending the other. Was this person genuinely an elite from the medium-level dimension? This was possible, because this Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate was far too powerful. It was very likely that only higher-level dimensions could raise such a freak. They all became hesitant. If Ling were truly a cultivator from that higher-level dimension, did that signify that their neighboring dimension was finally planning to target them? The higher level a dimension, the more numerous and more powerful their elites would be. This was just like how they could suppress the Promised City realm. Moreover, even if that dimension wasn't much more powerful than them, this still meant that they would need to dispatch a large number of elites to battle against them. At that time, could they still engulf the Promised City realm? They all watched on with heavy hearts. Fortunately, there was still the existence of the dimension itself. This was the most powerful weapon. However, it was also because of this that they were still struggling to defeat the Promised City realm. In the skies, Ling and Yang Jiehe continued to do battle. Ling was fighting in an extremely conservative manner, and this was because he was still unclear about his own strength. He needed something to compare it against. After battling for a long time, he was finally able to make an accurate assessment of his own strength. His ordinary battle prowess could roughly reach the peak stage of the second tier. After channeling his Heavenly Venerate techniques, it would naturally increase even further. However, Heavenly Venerate techniques varied, with each being different in might. Thus, it was difficult to say what level he would reach. In fact, this wasn't his full strength. However, limited by his cultivation level, he didn't dare to unleash his full strength. Otherwise, he might accidentally kill himself before even wounding his opponent. That would be as foolish as could be. Ling channeled the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll to elevate his battle prowess. He then channeled the 5 Elements Lightning technique. With his current power, he could easily channel 2 Heavenly Venerate techniques. Yang Jiehe also responded with Heavenly Venerate techniques. However, he had only mastered a single Heavenly Venerate technique, so he used this to launch a flurry of furious attacks at Ling. Even so, it was as if he were being ganged up on by 2 equal-level Heavenly Venerates, and this made him feel immense pressure. Heavenly Venerates were all supreme prodigies, however, so even though Yang Jiehe was at a disadvantage, he still remained stubborn and steadfast. In fact, he unleashed brilliant attacks from time to time, threatening to turn the tables on Ling. However, it was a shame that Ling still possessed a 3rd Heavenly Venerate technique. While channeling the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, he would be invincible. Yang Jiehe was flabbergasted. Did this person's strength have no limit? He could actually channel 3 Heavenly Venerate techniques at once? Even second-tier Heavenly Venerates would be so exhausted that they would quickly collapse, right? What was the strength of Heavenly Venerates? Apart from their bodies being tempered by fundamental power, and their body arts being powerful, their other strength was their ability to wield the fundamental power of heaven and earth. It was because of this that Heavenly Venerates could genuinely channel Heavenly Venerate techniques. Even so, there would eventually come a point where they ran out of energy. Ling energy consumption was far too abnormal. As a Heavenly Venerate, Yang Jiehe naturally wouldn't lack strong conviction and willpower. He gritted his teeth and persisted. However, following the continual depletion of his energy, he became less and less confident. If this continued, he would eventually suffer defeat, Chapter 2749 The Surrender of a Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2749 The Surrender of a Heavenly Venerate. 2749 The Surrender of a Heavenly Venerate. Yang Jihe was extremely powerful. After all, each Heavenly Venerate was a supreme prodigy. This was especially the case since he was someone who had cultivated to the pinnacle in a low-level dimension. Regardless of whether it was talent, knowledge, or willpower, he had reached the apex. Unfortunately, his opponent was Ling Han. He was a freak who had extracted the unique power of heaven knew how many realms. Moreover, he had even fused them together to form a core that endlessly provided him with power. This gave him the right to rival second-tier Heavenly Venerates while still being a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, this power was boundless, and it was as if he were a dimension himself. This was the most terrifying aspect. Boom! 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 Yang Jihe was already giving it his all, yet he was still unable to break free from Ling Han's suppression. Everyone watched on in speechlessness. Was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate about to be defeated? This Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate was definitely going to defy the heavens. Sweet Lord, so this is my grandpa? Ling Feifan gasped. He had heard innumerable stories about Ling Han's strength, yet just hearing about them was far too abstract. Moreover, it was entirely possible that those stories had been exaggerated. By the looks of things now, however, those stories hadn't been exaggerated at all. In fact, they had barely described a tenth of Ling Han's freakish power. How could a person be so freakish? Meanwhile, Yang Xianlong was rendered completely speechless as he glanced at Ling Feifan. He had initially planned to charge forward and capture Ling Feifan once his father achieved victory. He would then brutally humiliate him. Now, however, his dreams had been absolutely crushed. Ling Feifan was indeed weaker than him, yet Ling Han was completely capable of pummeling his father. Thus, if he still dared to act on his impulse, he would truly be asking for a beating. Friends, no matter what, Brother Yang is still someone from our dimension. We can't watch on and allow him to be defeated, can we? A Heavenly Venerate said. His title was Ancestral River, and he was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. Another second-tier Heavenly Venerate nodded in agreement. The internal conflict among them was another matter. Right now, however, this was something that pertained to another dimension, so they had to cooperate. Brethren, what do you say? The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate asked. Counting Yang Jihe as well, they had 4 second-tier Heavenly Venerates on their side. The other 3 were doing battle on the 2-realm battlefield. And Taiyan shook his head, saying, There's no need to further exacerbate this conflict. After all, it only started off as a small matter. Indeed, this was only a small conflict between 3 youths. Was there any need to involve so many second-tier Heavenly Venerates? Since Brethren is unwilling to step forward, let the 2 of us resolve this problem instead, the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate said. He then strode forward to join the battle. Another Heavenly Venerate also roared as he soared into the sky. Upon seeing reinforcements, Yang Jihe instantly rediscovered his confidence. At their lofty height, would they still care about the judgment of mere mortals? So what if they ganged up on their opponent? Who dared to disparage them? The 3 Heavenly Venerates teamed up to attack Ling Han. Ling Han was unfazed. His strength came from his own body, so he was confident in his invincibility. Let's battle it out. He continued to channel the 3 Heavenly Venerate techniques, with the core in his body funneling power into him and allowing him to continue the high-intensity battle. However, the 3 Heavenly Venerates were no pushovers, either, and they were completely able to rival Ling Han after teaming up. The battle continued for a month, yet it was still impossible to decide a victor. Friends, hear me out, would you? Why don't you all stop for a moment? And Taiyan said. The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate, and the others all nodded in their minds. Ling Han's strength was seemingly infinite, and they couldn't see any hope of suppressing or defeating him. Thus, they were better off ending the battle now. However, Ling Han was unwilling to accept this. After all, Yang Jihe had wanted to kill his grandson. Ignoring the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate, and the 4 Knights Heavenly Venerate, Ling Han continued to furiously attack Yang Jihe. You! The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate and the 4 Knights Heavenly Venerate were both infuriated. They had already stopped, yet Ling Han was still shamelessly continuing? They had no option but to rejoin the battle. 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. The battle between the 4 Heavenly Venerates was intense and chaotic. However, the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate and the others couldn't compare to Ling Han, who had a power core in his body that endlessly provided him with strength. They were indeed powerful, yet there would eventually come a point where their energy was exhausted. However, there were 3 of them, so it was entirely possible for 2 of them to battle against Ling Han while the third stood aside to rest. In fact, they only needed a short moment. Heavenly Venerates could forcefully extract the power of heaven and earth simply by opening their mouths and breathing. In just a few breaths, they could recover to their peak state. This was also the reason why Ling Han had been able to battle against Wu Haoyang for hundreds of thousands of years. Their recovery ability was far too quick. If this continued, they might never determine a victor. As the battle dragged on, the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate and the others became increasingly anxious. Right now, they were invading the Promised City realm, so elites like them couldn't leave the front lines for an extended period of time. Yet, 3 second-tier Heavenly Venerates had been caught up here, so the situation on the front lines was becoming increasingly dangerous. The Promised City realm was indeed weaker than the martial crystalline realm, but not by very much. Friend, what condition do you have to stop? The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate asked, finally yielding to his opponent. In his eyes, nothing was more important than defeating the Promised City realm. Give me Yang Jihe's head, Ling Han said. Impossible! To say nothing to Yang Jihe, even the Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate and the others couldn't agree to this. Second-tier Heavenly Venerates were the most powerful beings of the martial crystalline realm, so they definitely couldn't sacrifice one of them. Then the only option is to battle, Ling Han said coldly. You're taking things too far. The 3 Heavenly Venerates roared in fury. They all retrieved their Heavenly Venerate tools. Wang Wan Wan! 3 columns of brilliant light soared into the sky. These 3 Heavenly Venerate tools consisted of a sword, a broadsword, and a spear. With these Heavenly Venerate tools in hand, the battle prowess of the 3 Heavenly Venerates instantly soared. Ling Han didn't hold back, either, retrieving his divine demon sword, whose might astonished the 9 heavens. The 4 of them continued to do battle, with the 3 Heavenly Venerates already gaining an advantage. However, it was still impossible for them to suppress Ling Han. After battling for another 10 years, even Taiyan couldn't watch on any longer. He flew into the sky and said, Ling Han, that's enough. Otherwise, I'll have to step in as well. They all shared a common goal, and that was to defeat the Promised City realm. When that dimension collapsed, they would then share the huge opportunity that presented itself. Ling Han also knew that he couldn't possibly kill Yang Jihe with so many Heavenly Venerates opposing him. In fact, his failure was guaranteed as soon as Yang Jihe decided to flee. It wasn't that easy to kill a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. He pondered for a moment before replying. Fine, then tell Yang Jihe to apologize to my grandson. I'll temporarily forgive him after that. Gasp! Telling a paramount Heavenly Venerate to apologize to a mere celestial king? And only forgiving the former temporarily? Yang Jihe almost went wild with rage. So what if he decided to slaughter 10,000 ninth heaven celestial kings? Who dared to reprimand him? Now, he had only attempted to kill a single celestial king, and he had more so failed at that, yet Ling Han actually wanted him to apologize? Ling Han spread his hands and said, Don't want to? Then let's keep fighting. I don't mind at all. Brother Yang. The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate and the others looked toward Yang Jihe and said, Please understand the priorities. Since Ling Han had already taken a step back, it was now Yang Jihe's turn to concede. After all, they each needed to make a concession to resolve this problem, no? The 4 Knights Heavenly Venerate and Taiyan looked at him as well, and it was as if their expressions were saying, If you don't agree, then we'll step in and help you agree. Yang Jihe naturally couldn't die. However, he also couldn't act on his own whim. No matter what, defeating the Promised City realm was still the most important task at hand. Fine. Yang Jihe said, the veins on his forehead bulging. He had no option but to bow his head unless he wanted to have a falling out with the other Heavenly Venerates. Chapter 2750 Ceasefire. Chapter 2750 2750 Ceasefire. 2750 Ceasefire. Yang Jihe descended to the ground, stopping before Ling Feifan, and saying, I shouldn't have developed killing intent against you. Ling Feifan picked his ears and said, Come again? That's an apology? I don't accept it. He waved his hand with a righteous expression. Ling Han had the upper hand now, so Ling Feifan naturally needed to take advantage of it. What a joke! Just because he was weaker, he deserved to be flattened and stomped on. He was also a person. And Xior's eyes instantly glimmered with intoxication. This was the pride and domineering aura of her lover that she adored. Keep posturing, why don't you? Everyone said in their minds. At the same time, they were also incredibly envious of Ling Feifan. To have a second-tier Heavenly Venerate bow his head and apologize even just as a formality was still something that he could brag about forever. Ling Han stood beside Ling Feifan with a smile, and said, I also don't feel like that was an apology. What? You think our Ling clan is easy to pick on? A cold glint appeared in his eyes. He was still a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, so when he became a true Heavenly Venerate, killing second-tier Heavenly Venerates would be as easy as a wave of his hand. Yang Jihe's heart jolted. He could indeed belittle Ling Han right now. However, the latter was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate at this moment. What would happen when he advanced? Even if all 7 of the second-tier Heavenly Venerates here teamed up, would they be powerful enough to stop Ling Han? There were only 2 ways to deal with such a freak: kill him before he became invincible, or genuinely bow one's head and resolve any animosity. With this in mind, he eventually heaved a sigh. I was indeed in the wrong. I shouldn't have developed killing intent toward this young friend. Please accept my apology. As he said this, he retrieved a spatial god tool and handed it to Ling Feifan, saying, Treat this as compensation. Hopefully, it can soothe your anger. Not only was he apologizing, but he was even giving compensation. As a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, he was genuinely lowering his status as much as he could. Ling Feifan looked toward Ling Han. Upon seeing him nod, he accepted the spatial god tool with a smile, and said, Senior, you're truly being too generous. If you ever need me in the future, just give me a yell. Of course, that's as long as you compensate me each time. He used his divine sense to observe the spatial god tool, finding that it was indeed filled with an astonishing amount of treasures. Yang Jihe was truly pissed off at this moment, as this was the betrothal gift that he had prepared for the Yin clan. Thus, even with his wealth, he couldn't scrape together many such gifts. How many more times did Ling Feifan want to receive compensation? Friend Ling, and other friends, come on over and take a seat, and Tian said in invitation. After so many years, the reconstruction of the Yin clan residence was naturally complete. Ling Han and the 4 second-tier Heavenly Venerates all entered the Yin clan. Some of the first-tier Heavenly Venerates also walked over, wanting to listen to the conversation. After all, if the 5 super-elites discussed cultivation, they might have the opportunity to comprehend something new. Friend Ling, where are you from? The 4 Knights Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but ask this after taking a seat in the guest hall. Just what sort of place had raised such a freak? The Celestial Realm, Ling Han replied with a smile. He didn't conceal the truth. Celestial Realm? The Heavenly Venerates were all at a loss. They had never heard of this place before. Ling Han offered an explanation, telling them that the Celestial Realm was the youngest and most recently born dimension of the Genesis world at the very least. This would be true until a 2-realm passageway formed between the Celestial Realm and the dimension after it. Super low-level dimension? The Heavenly Venerates exclaimed in shock. Such a realm could produce a freak such as Ling Han? Was that truly a super low-level dimension? Ling Han recounted his experience of going to the transcendent dimension, and he described to them the atmosphere of that vast heaven and earth. At the same time, he also hung a grave threat over their heads. After hearing about the existence of hysteria, the Heavenly Venerates all wore grave expressions. They were racking their brains for ways to annihilate the Promised City realm so that they could use this opportunity to raise their cultivation. By the looks of things now, however, it was as if they were fighting with someone else on the edge of a volcanic crater. Regardless of who won, as long as the volcano erupted, they would both be disintegrated into dust. I urge you to end this pointless battle and head to the Flaming Frost Realm to fight against Hysteria's invasion. Otherwise, once Hysteria makes its way in, the entire world will be finished, Ling Han said. Moreover, the Flaming Frost Realm is a transcendent dimension, making it possible to reach the 7th tier. This is the destination that we should all strive toward. Everyone hesitated after hearing this. Conquering the Promised City realm had been their dream for generation after generation. Countless prodigies with unlimited potential had died for this cause, as had countless supreme elites. Now, however, they were being urged to end the battle just like that. And amicably join hands to face Hysteria? How could they accept this? Ling Han chuckled, and continued, If I hadn't come across this, then that would have been it. However, since I've become aware of the internal battle going on here, it's my responsibility to step in. Only 2 options sit before you. End the battle, or I'll join the Promised City realm. With my support, do you think you can still defeat the Promised City realm? Gasp! Everyone gasped upon hearing this, and they couldn't help but feel like Ling Han was being extremely unscrupulous. He was actually using this to threaten them. However, this was also extremely effective. Just then, even a team of 3 second-tier Heavenly Venerates had failed to suppress Ling Han. As such, him joining the Promised City realm might not necessarily turn the tables for them, but it would at least mitigate their disadvantage. The Ancestral River Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but ask, Friend Ling, this battle doesn't involve you, so why insist on becoming a foe? Ling Han shook his head, saying, You guys haven't been to the realm battlefield, so you don't understand the brutality of that place. Right now, the most critically important task is to resist Hysteria's invasion. Otherwise, how can a destroyed nest protect its eggs? What does it matter even if you become 3rd tier or 4th tier Heavenly Venerates? You'll still suffer the fate of being crushed into scraps. Everyone fell silent. However, no one questioned the veracity of Ling Han's words by thinking that he had made Hysteria up to frighten them. That would be far beneath him. Allow us a moment to consider this, the Heavenly Venerates said. This matter was far too important, so none of them could make up their minds on a whim. The others all took their leave, while Ling Han remained with Taiyan to discuss the wedding between Ling Feifan and Xior. The 2 youths were already in love anyway, and now their backgrounds were more so well matched in status. Thus, their marriage was naturally agreed upon very quickly. They weren't in a hurry to get married, as Ling Han needed to first go to the Promised City realm to bring Ling Jianxue and his wife over. Moreover, he still needed to end the war between the 2 dimensions. Ling Han set off with Ling Feifan, heading toward the 2-realm passageway. His speed was now astonishing, so it only took him a few days to reach his destination. This place was very similar to the Celestial Realm, with an army encampment keeping guard and a large number of cultivators present to train themselves. Ling Feifan had traveled through many dimensions with his parents, so he had long since become accustomed to acclimatizing himself to the regulations of each world. Meanwhile, Ling Han more so didn't need to worry about this. He had created a power core for himself, so things would be the same for him no matter where he went. His strength came from within. Thus, when they arrived at the 2-realm passageway, their battle prowess wasn't affected in the least. They entered the passageway without any difficulties, and it would be impossible for others to notice anything amiss about them. Thus, they naturally weren't stopped by anyone as they started to travel between the dimensions. After some effort, they passed the most chaotic area of the 2-realm passageway, and arrived at the Promised City realm. Here, they also didn't attract the attention of anyone. It was as if they were native to this world. Ling Feifan led the way, bringing Ling Han to the army encampment to look for Ling Jianxue and his wife. Ling Feifan! The people in the encampment exclaimed in deep shock upon seeing Ling Feifan. After all, many of them had seen him being defeated and captured. How had he suddenly returned? Chapter 2751 2751 Smeared. Chapter 2751 2751 Smeared. 2751 Smeared. Ling Feifan, how did you come back? Exactly, weren't you captured? How did you come back? Everyone asked this in curiosity. Before Ling Feifan could even answer, he saw a young man pushing his way through the crowd and making his way over, saying, Ling Feifan, did you surrender to the enemy? Is that why they released you back as a spy? Upon hearing this, a wave of commotion spread through the crowd. Ling Feifan was infuriated, and he shouted, Jiang Yiran, don't you dare smear me! Head, your family isn't from our dimension, so it won't be a surprise if you guys surrender and betray us. The young man scoffed. This person was called Jiang Yiran. As for why he was targeting Ling Feifan, the reason for this was simple. This was because a girl that he liked had extremely strong feelings for Ling Feifan. As a result, he always targeted Ling Feifan no matter the situation. This time, the opportunity was even better. As a measly first heaven celestial king, he had actually managed to escape alive after being captured and brought to a foreign dimension? And he hadn't suffered a single wound? He had fled back himself? Who would believe this? There was definitely something fishy about this. You bastard! Ling Feifan roared, unleashing his killing intent. This accusation was far too severe. This person was extremely underhanded, and if his smear truly stuck, then it wouldn't only be him who was punished. His parents would be dragged into the mess as well. What? You want to kill me to keep this a secret? Jiang Yiran said, sticking his neck forward. He wasn't afraid of Ling Feifan, as he was also a first heaven celestial king. He was confident that no one at the same cultivation level could defeat him. Bastard, I'll pummel you to death! Ling Feifan roared as he charged forward and threw a punch at Jiang Yiran. Sure enough, you've been shamed enough to erupt in anger now that I've exposed you, Jiang Yiran said with a cold chuckle. He raised his hands to form a seal before his body, and said, Hurry, ask the lords to come over. We need to thoroughly interrogate. Pooh! As he was speaking, Ling Feifan's fist also arrived. Ling Feifan's body had already been tempered by Ling Han, so he now possessed a powerful body art. Even if he couldn't compare to the Ling Han of yore, his power was still quite extraordinary. Under this punch, Jiang Yiran's arms were both brutally broken, and he was more so sent flying into the sky. Pun! He flew back, with the dozen or so people behind him acting as human cushions. Only after skidding back a huge distance did they finally grind to a halt. Jiang Yiran was absolutely stunned. Ling Feifan had only been gone for a few years, so how had he suddenly become so powerful? Look at this! Just look at this! You definitely surrendered to the enemy. Otherwise, how could you have become so powerful? He screamed. Channeling his source power, he slowly healed his arms. Are you truly seeking death? Ling Feifan asked in a baleful voice. With Ling Han standing beside him, he was naturally filled with confidence. It was also because of this that he didn't try to explain himself. Are you threatening me? Jiang Yiran said with a loud laugh. Even if you can shut me up, can you shut up the mouths of everyone in the world? He was intent on smearing Ling Feifan as much as he could. In any case, Ling Feifan's return was far too strange and suspicious to begin with, so it was extremely easy to sling mud and make it stick. Ling Feifan gave a soft shout as he lashed out again, launching another attack at Jiang Yiran. Pun! 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 In just a few strikes, Jiang Yiran already became as disheveled as could be. Before a combination of body art and regulations, how could he possibly resist? Ling Feifan, that's enough. Exactly. There's genuinely a lot you need to explain. The others couldn't watch on any longer, and they all stepped forward to stop Ling Feifan. Ling Feifan flew into a rage, and he shouted. He's been smearing me this entire time, So why did none of you step forward to stop him, huh? Everyone was rendered speechless. In their minds, however, they all mused that even though Jiang Yiran had taken things too far, his accusations had indeed been aligned with their own doubts. Who's causing trouble in the army camp? A voice that was filled with dignity and might said. They looked over, only to see an elegant man in white appearing, not a speck of dust on his clothes. Many females instantly gazed at him with respect and reverence. This man in white was called Shinbo, and he was a ninth heaven celestial king. There were few heavenly venerates in this low-level dimension, so ninth heaven celestial kings could almost be regarded as the most powerful elites. Thus, he naturally made their hearts flutter. Jiang Yiran hurriedly clasped his hands and said, "My respects to Lord Shin." Ling Feifan also stopped his attacks, saying, "Lord Shin." Shinbo raised his hand slightly before looking at Ling Feifan in surprise and saying, "You're back? What about the other prisoners?" "How would I know?" Ling Feifan said in his mind. Because of his relationship with Ensure, he had been directly brought to the Yin clan. Thus, he naturally didn't know about the other situation. He shook his head and replied, "I don't know." "Why don't you know?" Shinbo said in a stern voice. "How did you escape?" Ling Feifan suppressed his anger and said, "Since I've already returned, I'll naturally explain everything in detail. However, my parents are still worried about me, so can you allow me to visit them first? If you've defected to the enemy, that's a most serious crime, so how can you still be allowed to visit anyone?" Jiang Yiran interjected. Shinbo wore an expression of displeasure upon hearing this. He was currently speaking, so who had the right to cut him off? However, Jiang Yiran's words were his thoughts as well, so he simply glared at Jiang Yiran, but didn't reprimand him. "The actions of I, Ling Feifan, will let down neither heaven and earth nor my own conscience," Ling Feifan said loudly. "By treating me like this, are you not afraid of bitterly disappointing me? If you're truly innocent, then what do you have to be afraid of?" Shinbo said sternly. "Make haste and explain yourself." Feifan. Right at this moment, two voices sounded in unison, and a man and a woman immediately flew over. "Ling Jianxue! Chen Shuang! Father! Mother!" Ling Feifan hurriedly called. After he was captured, they had definitely prepared for the worst. Now that they were reunited, they all felt like they had been apart for a lifetime. The three of them were just about to embrace, yet Shinbo immediately stopped them, and said, "You too, your son has very likely committed the crime of defecting to the enemy, so before we understand the situation fully, he needs to undergo interrogation first." Ling Jianxue was enraged upon hearing this. The small family of three had come here to fight for a foreign world, yet they were now being accused of defecting to the enemy? Because of his incandescent rage, Ling Jianxue failed to even notice Ling Han. In any case, Ling Han's hair was still disheveled and his face was still dirty, and it had more so been over an epoch since they had last seen each other. Thus, how would he suspect that this person was his father? "Shinbo, step aside," he said in a baleful voice. It was because he was a righteous person who couldn't stand to see a weaker person being bullied by a stronger person that he had decided to battle for the promised city realm. In fact, he had stuck to this principle throughout his journey through the numerous dimensions. Now, however, his thankless sacrifice had earned him the accusation of his son being a traitorous defector? How could he accept this? "Ling Jianxue, don't tell me you want to get physical with me?" Shinbo said coldly. He was naturally unafraid. "And what if we do?" Chen Shuang said. She was hot-tempered, and she immediately lashed out at Shinbo. She had been accepted as a disciple of the Heavenly Saint Palace back then, so her talent naturally wasn't lacking. After cultivating for an epoch, she had also reached the 9th heaven, giving her the right to oppose Shinbo. Boom! The two elites became locked in an intense battle, and the surrounding crowd naturally had no option but to scamper. Otherwise, if they were accidentally hit by a wayward shock wave, they would truly suffer a miserable fate. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue seized this opportunity to rush up to Ling Feifan, asking, "Feifan, are you okay?" "Dad, I'm fine," Ling Feifan replied. Only at this moment did Ling Jianxue look toward Ling Han. A sense of familiarity involuntarily welled up in his heart, yet he was unable to immediately put his finger on the reason. Moreover, this was the Promised City realm, so how could he be familiar with anyone here? Chapter 2752 Attacked on all sides. Chapter 2752 Attacked on all sides. 2752 Attacked on all sides. Ling Feifan was just about to reveal Ling Han's identity, yet he suddenly felt a tremendous force rush over, causing his chest to ache. This forced him to swallow his words. "Brother Lei, Brother Qin, Brother Zhao," Ling Jianxue said with a serious expression. 3 Ninth Heaven Celestial Kings had come in unison. "I want to first congratulate Brother Ling on your son's safe return," Lei Bing said. "However, over 3,000 others were captured with him, so why was he able to safely return by himself? This naturally requires an explanation." Ling Jianxue was boiling with anger, and he said, "Our family of 3 has been fighting here for several million years, and the contributions that we've made have been clear for everyone to see. Have we not even earned the most basic trust? The human heart is a volatile beast. Who knows?" Chen Wangyan said apathetically. He didn't give Ling Jianxue any help. "So please cooperate with us, Brother Ling. If we find no issues after questioning your son carefully, we'll be willing to apologize to Brother Ling and your missus," Zhao Beiyu said with a smile. This was asking for Ling Jianxue and his wife to surrender without putting up a fight. Ling Jianxue was even more enraged. Because of this one thing, the 3 of them were all going to be treated as criminals? Once they were captured, their life and death would fall into the hands of others. As a cultivator, how could he allow this to happen? "Since you're all suspicious of us, this place is no longer suitable for us to remain," Ling Jianxue said with a sigh. "Shuang, let's go." Whoosh! Chen Shuang immediately returned to Ling Jianxue's side. "You want to leave?" Shinbo said in a baleful voice. "Perhaps you're feeling guilty? Shinbo! Have some conscience when you speak," Ling Jianxue said in a deep and solemn voice. He was truly angered at this moment. "Facing traitors, what respect do we need to show?" Lei Bing said. "Let's leave," Ling Jianxue said. "Can you leave?" Zhao Beiyu said, stepping forward and unleashing an attack at Ling Jianxue and his wife. As for Ling Feifan and Ling Han, they were naturally ignored. After all, one was only a first heaven celestial king, and the other more so looked like a beggar. He didn't look like an elite no matter how they looked at him. Ling Jianxue faced the attack head-on. Pun! The 2 of them immediately launched into battle. Ling Han purposefully didn't interfere, as he wanted to observe his son's current strength. He immediately nodded in satisfaction. Ling Jianxue hadn't wasted his time roaming so many dimensions. He had continually recultivated using each dimension's unique regulations, and this had allowed him to form an extremely stable foundation. He was only a step away from advancing to the Heavenly Venerable tier. Initially, Ling Jianxue's talent wasn't enough for him to advance to the Heavenly Venerable tier. However, nothing in this world was a certainty, so through his perseverance and effort, he had ultimately transformed the impossible into possible. As expected of his son, Zhao Beiyu was no match for Ling Jianxue, and he immediately fell into a disadvantage after just a few exchanges. Upon seeing this, Lei Bing and Shinbo both stepped forward to join the battle. With a soft shout, Chen Shuang also joined the battle, assisting her husband. Chen Wangyan was unwilling to be left out, so he also joined in, turning the battle into a 4-on-2. This dimension naturally had more 9th Heaven Celestial Kings than just Lei Bing and the others. Thus, as the battle dragged on, more and more 9th Heaven Celestial Kings appeared. However, none of them joined the battle. Most of them had a strong sense of pride and dignity, rendering them unwilling to join forces with others. Ling Han had intentions of training his son, so he also remained a spectator. Unless they faced perilous danger, he wouldn't step forward to help them. Ling Jianxue was truly an extraordinary cultivator. Even though he wasn't as freakish as Ling Han, And even though he didn't possess a body art, his foundations were truly far too stable. Thus, he was able to take on the 4 elites all by himself. Meanwhile, Chen Shuangshuang acted like an assassin as she danced around them. The cooperation between husband and wife was extremely strong. They were 2 against 4, yet not only were they not at a disadvantage, but they were even showing signs of winning. However, 3 more 9th Heaven Celestial Kings immediately stepped forward to oppose them, joining the ranks attacking Ling Jianxue and his wife. At this moment, Ling Jianxue and his wife immediately showed signs of cracking, falling to a disadvantage. "Brother Ling, why struggle in futility? As long as you obediently come with us, we won't hurt the 3 of you. After all, we've seen your contributions with our own eyes," Lei Bing said. Ling Jianxue naturally wouldn't believe his words. Was he trying to trick a 3-year-old child? He finally understood the concept of outsiders necessarily have their ulterior motives. However, it wasn't him with ulterior motives, but rather that these people had never trusted him to begin with. To think that he had fought for them with such loyalty and vigor. "Break free," he said to Chen Shuangshuang through his divine sense. If they attracted the attention of a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, or a 1st-tier or 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate, they would no longer have the opportunity to escape. Anyhow, they had a rare treasure on them that could help conceal their aura, so as long as they managed to lose their pursuers, even Heavenly Venerates wouldn't be able to find them. Chen Shuangshuang nodded in agreement, and the 2 of them suddenly unleashed their trump cards, immediately breaking free from their opponents. It was incredibly difficult for Celestial Kings to kill fellow Celestial Kings, especially those at the same cultivation. Right at this moment, they heard a cold hump that slammed down at them like a heavy hammer. Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang shuddered violently as they immediately crashed down from the sky. This was the action of a Heavenly Venerate, not a Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate. Black clouds gathered overhead, with a gigantic face appearing in its center. Like the thunder god, this person's mouth stuck out, and their chin was like an ape's. "Our respects to Lord Vanishing Thunder!" everyone cried as they fell to their knees. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate, a 1st-tier Heavenly Venerate. However, 4 people remained standing: Ling Han and Ling Jianxue's family of 3. "Impudence! You dared to remain standing before me!" the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said in displeasure. He was a newbie Heavenly Venerate, so he cared deeply about the rules and regulations of the cultivation world. This was especially the case when he saw those 9th Heaven Celestial Kings who were previously at the same cultivation as him lowering their heads. This gave him a euphoric feeling. Ling Jianxue remained silent, his expression cold. There was one thing about him that was very similar to Ling Han, who was also an extremely proud person. It was just that this pride was usually concealed under his warmth and friendliness. "So what if I remain standing? Don't regard yourself too highly. After all, didn't you start off as a mere mortal as well?" Ling Feifan suddenly said. Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. A measly Celestial King actually dared to chide a Heavenly Venerate. Was he seeking death? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had already been extremely displeased to begin with, so upon seeing Ling Feifan dare to retort him, he instantly exploded with killing intent. He was indeed a prodigy, but there was no rule saying that prodigies needed to be generous and open-minded. He immediately lashed out. Boom! A large hand slammed down from the clouds, surrounded by a sea of blue lightning as it rushed toward Ling Feifan. Heavenly Venerates didn't need to have any reservations. If they saw something they didn't like, they could immediately lash out to crush it. Boom! The large hand landed, with even heaven and earth shuddering under its might. Ling Jianxue and Chen Shuangshuang both despaired. They were being suppressed by the might of the Heavenly Venerate, so how could they possibly rush over to help their child? However, Ling Feifan remained fearless, and he remained glaring at the sky, refusing to bow his head. He was naturally filled with confidence. Ling Han had defeated even second-tier Heavenly Venerates, so what harm could a first-tier Heavenly Venerate cause? Pun! The large hand landed, yet it was blocked by another hand, rendering it unable to slam into the ground. Everyone's gaze was instantly drawn to Ling Han. "This is a Heavenly Venerate from the martial crystalline realm," they immediately exclaimed. This dimension definitely didn't have such a Heavenly Venerate. Moreover, he had arrived together with Ling Feifan from the martial crystalline realm, so what else could he be but a Heavenly Venerate from that realm? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate faltered upon seeing this. However, he immediately sneered and said, "Even if you're a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, you'll still be nothing more than a first-tier Heavenly Venerate after arriving in this dimension. Taking into account the suppression from heaven and earth, you aren't necessarily powerful enough to rival me." Second-tier Heavenly Venerates had definitely comprehended the unique power of a dimension and one of the fundamental powers of the Genesis world. However, after traveling to another dimension, they would no longer be able to wield the former power, the one cultivated during the first tier. Thus, after traveling to another dimension, second-tier Heavenly Venerates could only be regarded as first-tier Heavenly Venerates. Chapter 2753 Father and Son Reunited. Chapter 2753 Father and Son Reunited. 2753 Father and Son Reunited. First-tier Heavenly Venerates were no match for second-tier Heavenly Venerates. Not only did they have mastery of one fundamental power less, but they were also limited by the fact that the unique power of a dimension couldn't possibly surpass the fundamental powers of the Genesis world. However, after traveling to another dimension, the unique power of the dimensions would only remain in the Heavenly Venerate's body. Every bit consumed was every bit gone. This was similar to the situation faced by celestial kings. Thus, second-tier Heavenly Venerates would quickly drop down to the first tier. Add to that the suppression of a foreign dimension, and it was entirely possible that foreign second-tier Heavenly Venerates would become even weaker than indigenous first-tier Heavenly Venerates. If this hadn't been the case, wouldn't it have been much easier for higher-level dimensions to conquer lower-level dimensions? Ling Han smiled faintly as he retracted his hand, and said, "If you're not afraid of death, then come try me." The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate hesitated upon hearing this. He refused to believe that someone who could become a Heavenly Venerate was a fool. Thus, daring to come here alone, this person was definitely confident in his own abilities, or had some other source of confidence. Perhaps, the martial crystalline realm was about to launch a large-scale attack? So they sent a Heavenly Venerate over to clear the path? He hurriedly sent a signal. No matter what, being careful was his top priority. "Who are you? Do you dare tell me your name?" the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said solemnly. This was also the point of everyone else's curiosity. How could elites, especially Heavenly Venerable tier elites, appear out of thin air? Ling Jianxue had been staring at Ling Han the entire time, and at this moment, his eyes suddenly lit up. His expression became as moved as could be. This was Ling Han. Ling Han? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate repeated in confusion. He had never heard of such a person before. However, he immediately pushed this out of his mind, and said, "Regardless of who you are, I suggest you stand aside." "Father!" Ling Jianxue exclaimed. He finally understood why his son was able to return. It was because Ling Han had helped him. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate immediately realized that he had misspoken. Just then, he had even told this person to stand aside. Fuck! His son was about to be killed, so how could he endure and not step forward? "So we truly didn't accuse you wrongly. You're genuinely spies from the martial crystalline realm," he said. If this hadn't been the case, why would Ling Han and Ling Feifan have returned from the martial crystalline realm? Ling Han made a pressing motion with his hand, causing an overwhelming power to surge into the surroundings. The pressure crushing down on Ling Jianxue and Qin Shuangshuang immediately disappeared, allowing them to stand back up. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You finally know that I'm your father, huh? Why were you always mucking around outside back then? Otherwise, he would have wanted to bring his son to the Flaming Frost realm." Ling Jianxue awkwardly ran his hand through his hair. "You guys!" the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate roared. They were taking things much too far. Were they treating him, a Heavenly Venerate, as nothing more than a prop? He lashed out in fury. Boom! Howling winds surged at Ling Han. Ling Han raised his hand and blocked all of these attacks. At the same time, he let Hellion Xuanxue exit the celestial guest residence so that she could reunite with their son. This reunion between mother and son was naturally filled with emotion, with tears brimming in Hellion Xuanxue's eyes. She had truly missed her son. Meanwhile, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate continued to launch a flurry of furious attacks. After a dozen or so seconds, however, he stopped his attacks in astonishment. Ling Han was merely holding a single hand in the sky, yet he was able to easily block all of his attacks. Just how terrifying was his strength? Thoughts of retreat crept into his mind. At the very least, he couldn't face Ling Han by himself. What courage! You actually dared to charge over all by yourself. A voice said coldly. A figure appeared over the horizon, arriving in just a single stride. They stood in midair. This was a young-looking man, though there was a single silver horn on his head. He radiated with an astonishing aura. Everyone once again kneeled and said, "Our respects to Lord Mysterious Horn." This was naturally another Heavenly Venerate, the Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate. He was also at the first tier. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate instantly rediscovered his courage. After arriving here, a second-tier Heavenly Venerate from the martial crystalline realm would inevitably decline to the first tier. Thus, what did it matter even if Ling Han were slightly stronger than him? If the two of them teamed up, they would be more than powerful enough to deal with him. Very well, your family has finally reunited, so why don't you rest here for all eternity? He roared. Ling Han's gaze became cold. By the looks of it, you truly want to die. Enough with your arrogance. Right now, you're also nothing but a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate said in disdain. Ling Han reached over to grab at the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. Since you've come here, you have no option but to lay down even if you're a dragon. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate roared as he charged forward without fear. Pun! The two of them exchanged a blow, and the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate's arrogant expression instantly underwent a drastic change as if he had seen a ghost. With a shudder, a plume of blood instantly exploded from his entire body like a fine mist. He was almost smacked to death. How was this possible? He was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. Even if he were weaker than a second-tier Heavenly Venerate, with the suppression of heaven and earth, this result should have been impossible. The Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate was also deeply stunned as he looked at Ling Han. He hurriedly unleashed a divine sense fluctuation to request more reinforcements. Ling Han ignored the Mysterious Horn Heavenly Venerate as he unleashed another palm strike at the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate gritted his teeth as he defended with all his might, also responding with an attack of his own. This was the Promised City realm. This was his home ground. Thus, as long as he could endure for a while, reinforcements would quickly arrive. However, Ling Han had already developed killing intent, so how could his opponent withstand these attacks so easily? Pun! A single palm strike was like an entire world collapsing, with a profound power bearing down on the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate and forcing him to sprawl over the ground. Under the watchful gazes of everyone, a paramount Heavenly Venerate was smacked into the ground with a single strike. What face did he still have? Ling Han's expression was cold as he said, "Is my son someone that you can humiliate?" Upon his arrival, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had immediately used his Heavenly Venerable Tier Might to smash Ling Jianxue and Qin Shuangshuang into the ground. At that time, with training them in mind, Ling Han hadn't stepped forward to help them. However, this didn't mean that he would forget and forgive. One had to realize that his family was his bottom line. Whoever dared to harm them would die. The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate lay sprawled on the ground, unable to move even a single finger. The gulf between them was such that it seemed like a second-tier Heavenly Venerate was bullying a first-tier Heavenly Venerate. As the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate lay on the ground, he could see the peculiar gazes of everyone in the surroundings resting on him. This made him feel so humiliated that he wanted to die. He was a Heavenly Venerate! Someone that even the heavens had to venerate! Just how paramount was his status? Before he could even finish this thought, he saw that Ling Han had already raised his foot, and was about to stomp down on his head. The color drained from his face in terror. Lying sprawled on the ground was already embarrassing enough, so if he were further stomped with a foot, would he still have the face to see others in the future? You dare? The vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate roared. Pa! Ling Han's foot stomped on his face, not missing the opportunity to twist around twice. Why wouldn't he dare? Ling Jianxue and Qin Shuangshuang were filled with emotion and gratitude. Ling Han was venting anger for them. Meanwhile, Ling Jianxue's blood boiled with excitement. He also wanted to possess boundless strength like Ling Han. If anyone dared to offend him, he would resolutely sentence them to death. He would deal with everything right there and then. Friend, that's quite enough, a composed voice said. An elderly man with white hair walked over. He was tall and solidly built, with his face a healthy red and his white hair tied with a rope made from hemp. There was even a gourd hanging by his waist, making him exude an aura of age and antique. Spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate! Everyone said as they once again kneeled. In fact, even the mysterious horn Heavenly Venerate bowed slightly, saying, Greetings to Lord Spiritual Gourd. This was a second-tier Heavenly Venerate. Oh? He wanted to kill my son, so why should I release him? Ling Han asked as he kept his foot on the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate's face. He didn't show any signs of wanting to lift his foot. Because that's my command. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate replied, a terrifying aura immediately erupting from his body. Boom! Like the tumultuous sea, this was a formidable aura that caused even the first-tier Heavenly Venerates to shake. Chapter 2754 2754 Killed. Chapter 2754 2754 Killed. 2754 Killed. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was very domineering. I have said so, so that is the heaven, that is the earth, and that is the law. Ling Han smiled slightly. Unfortunately, you are not yet qualified for that. He lowered his head and looked at the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate beneath his foot, asking, Let me ask you, do you have any regrets? In full public like this, even if the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate felt reservations, there was no way that he would show weakness. Immediately, he raised his head high, and declared, Whatever I do, I feel no guilt towards heaven and earth, so what regrets would I have? Very good. Ling Han nodded, and then raised his foot. Everyone thought that he would be letting him go, and gave in, mentally. After all, this was the promised city realm. No matter how fierce the dragon passing through was, they would have to be wary of the local tyrant. Pa! But they had not even finished this thought when they saw Ling Han's foot had already descended, directly stomping the head of the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate into mush. Thuck! 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 That was a Heavenly Venerate, and his head had actually been destroyed. Everyone watched with wide eyes, their faces filled with disbelief. However, Heavenly Venerates were too strong. Even if his mind had shattered, he had not died yet. Instead, a soul flew out, turning into a sphere of light. This light sphere was flickering with lightning, revealing the face of the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate. He glared harshly at Ling Han, his eyes filled with fury and venom. For Heavenly Venerates, the physical body was extremely important because they extracted the power to temper their physical bodies. Without the support of a physical body, the soul was a fish out of water, and was incredibly weak. Of course, if he snatched another body for himself, it was not impossible for him to cultivate again to Heavenly Venerable tier, but that would definitely require an endless amount of time. How dare you! The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate was enraged. Ling Han actually dared kill in front of him. Just what great and brazen insolence was this? What did he take him for? What would I not dare? Ling Han continued to move, grabbing out towards the vanishing thunder Heavenly Venerate. Since he had declared that he would kill him, there was no way he would give up halfway. The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate naturally could not tolerate this. Immediately he charged out, wanting to rescue the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. Allowing Ling Han to commit a crime once was already extremely embarrassing for him, so how could he allow Ling Han to commit another offense? Boom! The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han, his blow bearing an incomparably vast and powerful might. Ling Han was unafraid, and met the incoming attack with a punch. The two great elites exchanged blows once, which instantly created a shock wave that seemed capable of destroying worlds. Pun pun pun! Everyone around them were involuntarily sent flying. The most unfortunate among them had to be the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. Initially, he had naturally had no fear of a second-tier Heavenly Venerate level shock wave, but now he was only left with a soul, which was incredibly fragile. This was his fate. He hurriedly extracted the power of heaven and earth, forming a defensive barrier in front of him. Drawing on the power of heaven and earth was naturally no issue for him. Pun! He was too close to them, and his defense was actually shattered by this shock wave directly. As the aftermath surged, his soul was also ripped, and the pain could not be described. If it was not for the fact that he no longer had a physical body, he would definitely be throwing up copious amounts of blood by now. Why you? The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate paled in great shock. He hurriedly retreated over 50 kilometers away, his eyes set on Ling Han, filled with astonishment and terror. That was because he had discovered that Ling Han had not drawn on the power of heaven and earth at all. There were three possibilities for this. Firstly, Ling Han was a first-tier Heavenly Venerate from another dimension, so there was naturally no way he could draw on the unique power of this dimension. Secondly, he was deliberately using only the power of his physical body. The chance of the third possibility being true was completely zero, but it was that Ling Han was only a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, so there was naturally no way he could draw on the power of heaven and earth. But whatever was the case, his power should be incredibly weaker than that of the spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate. How could it be that the former fought him to a tie with a single strike? In fact, the former even seemed slightly superior in their clash? How could this be understood? Who exactly are you? The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate asked. If the martial crystalline realm had had this kind of freak, what need would there have been for them to slowly progress with their invasion? They could completely unleash a full invasion. Kwang! Right at this moment, a reaction came from the heaven and earth, striking madly at the spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate, and Ling Han, on the other hand, was completely fine. Pseudo-Heavenly Venerate! The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate's mouth was wide, looking like he had seen a ghost. It was not that he had not considered this possibility, but the chance of this was close to zero in his mind. Wasn't it a joke for a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate to be capable of matching a second-tier Heavenly Venerate? Was there anything even more exaggerated than this in this world? But the heaven and earth had targeted him, and ignored Ling Han completely, so wasn't this the best proof? Beneath them, a commotion had also risen among the crowd. How could they believe this? The Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate was filled with even more disbelief. If it was true that his physical body had been destroyed by a pseudo-Heavenly Venerate, then wouldn't he become the greatest joke in all history? Ling Han did not answer. Xiao! His figure moved, and he continued his charge towards the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. He was going to establish his might. Stop! The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate hurriedly pounced towards him. Whether it was for his own reputation, or for the sake of the dimension, he naturally could not let Ling Han kill a Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, ignoring the spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate completely. He was hell-bent on attacking the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate tried all means to stop him, but his strength was not superior to Ling Han's in the first place, especially when mistakes would be made during an extensive period of defense. Even if he blocked 1,000, 10,000 blows from Ling Han, as long as even one blow made it through and landed, the Vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate would definitely be killed. The spiritual Gourd Heavenly Venerate was very gloomy in this battle. He had never been so tired, and he felt as if he had power, but it could not be used the way he wanted. Even if he continuously saved the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate, the latter was still severely wounded, his soul being torn many times, and endlessly became weaker. If things went on like this, it would not take too long before the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate would die. No. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate's eyes turned, setting on Ling Jianxue and the others. Since you can attack the weaker person, I naturally can as well. They could just hold hostages over each other so that the other party would not hurt the hostage that they had captured. This thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately pounced towards Ling Jianxue and the others. Ling Han humphed. You wish to die as well? His figure turned, and set off in pursuit of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. However, with a wave of his right hand, a cold light surged out, shooting towards the soul of the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. The vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had just sighed in relief. He had not expected that Ling Han would actually strike a blow against him now, scaring him so much that he hurriedly drew on the power of heaven and earth to defend himself. This time, there was no spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate to help him out of the crisis, so he had to do it himself. Pooh! Yet the defensive shield formed from the power of heaven and earth was completely useless against this cold strike, and a sword was seen piercing towards him. A Heavenly Venerate tool! The vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate exclaimed inwardly. He was a newly promoted Heavenly Venerate, and had not yet forged his own Heavenly Venerate tool. Otherwise, he would have used it long ago. He had just barely finished the thought when the stab from the divine demon's sword reached him. The soul was extremely fragile in the first place, so how could it possibly withstand the sharpness of a Heavenly Venerate tool? His soul was immediately pierced through. Under the calamitous destructive power of a Heavenly Venerate tool, the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate's soul was immediately destroyed. He released a wave of dimension power, which instantly spread throughout this entire dimension. The vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate had died. There was no empathetic grief from the heaven and earth, or any shower of blood. Heavenly Venerates were not under the control of the heaven and earth. Rather, they were hated and envied by the heaven and earth, so there were naturally no unnatural phenomena to be seen. Xiao! Ling Han had already come close. He threw a punch, and the 5 elements lightning technique channeled, blasting towards the back of the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. The spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate could not ignore this. If he was struck by Ling Han with the Heavenly Venerate technique, his physical body might immediately crumble, just like the vanishing Thunder Heavenly Venerate. He turned around. Pun! He sent out a palm strike, parrying this punch from Ling Han. However, Ling Han's steps took an abrupt turn, and he immediately appeared in front of Ling Jianxue, Helian Xianxue, and the others. With a wave of his hand, he instantly took all 4 of them into the celestial guest residence. Then, he turned around, and faced the spiritual gourd Heavenly Venerate. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.